Good evening, people. Hello, everybody. How's everyone doing? Fantastic to be live again, 2 days in a row. Wasn't planning on doing live, and then our dear friend, the ever giving Metatron, decided to revisit the topic of Black Egypt. Shockingly to me, I sincerely thought we had put this chapter behind us. I thought we had moved on. I thought, hey, it's good. He's turned a corner. I'd actually grown surprisingly fond of the fella. I'm not gonna lie. I thought he's a rage baiter, but at the same time, you know, um, there are some elements where he comes off as a little bit kind of like judicious and kind of like self evaluative. And I always respect when people kind of go, I could be wrong. If you want to make an audience with me and instantly for me to take a liking to you, all I need to hear is those four words. I could be wrong. I like that. I like it when people acknowledge the fact that they could be wrong and are willing to change their perspective. But here we are again. And I decided, let me watch the video, because obviously people, you can imagine what it's like. People hit me up straight away. Metatron's posted this, that, and I'm like, Metatron posts a lot, and there's no way on earth I'm going to try to even respond to all of the controversial topics. I don't do kind of like rage bait responses. It's like, I don't have the energy for that. But obviously when we touch this topic of, Black Egypt, and, he's making reference to our discussion, then I felt somewhat obliged, somewhat obligated to hear him out and to hear if what he raised was good and cogent arguments. And unfortunately, it seems to be the case that he's kind of at it again. Okay. The arguments weren't great, and you're going to see that. And he's fiddled the books, so to speak, in terms of what he's presented to his audience. It certainly, the study that he's looked at didn't agree with him, or maybe he didn't understand that the study didn't agree with him. But we're going to go through that now. And actually, we're going to take the opportunity as we go through Metatron's video. So you're going to have to bear with me, because I always try to, in fairness to him, it's a short video. He is not me. He's not going to waffle on for a long time. While I'm like on these live streams, they're always like 2 to 3 hours each, if you're lucky. He's relatively concise. So in saying that, this is a pretty short and concise video where he's kind of like got his snippet and he said what he needs to say. And that'll give us the opportunity to kind of go through it, watch it in full. I'm going to speed it up slightly so that, you're not sitting here getting bored, but we'll watch the video in full, stopping and addressing points as we go through. It's not going to be, I say that famous last words, I don't think it's going to be super long, because you've got to realize there's actually not much to this. The bottom line is it doesn't say what he says, but I'm going to use that as an opportunity for us also to explore some really important other works that kind of support the thesis that we put forward quite heavily, and broaden the subject. I think that's quite important, that we kind of like broaden the discussion beyond beyond the simplistic kind of like what's being presented here, and broaden it and look at things realistically. So that's important to do. I was really surprised. As I'm kind of like talking, I'm gonna kind of load up Metatron's response video, so we kind of like get started straight away. But I'm really surprised, because this is like, when someone really likes an artifact, Metatron, for some reason, I say for some reason, but we know the reason, he loves Munutilis. That's why he says Munutilis in Italian. Maybe it's because he's Italian. He loves Munutilis well, I shouldn't say reconstruction. Minutili's, it's not even a facsimile. Reproduction of the tomb of Seti I. He loves it. He absolutely loves it, to the point where I've rebutted him on this point, not once, not twice, but I think 3 times. This will be my 4th time I've rebutted his use of Minutili's reproduction. And to be very, very, very clear, I don't rebuke, or not even rebuke, rebut the use of Minutili's reproduction just because it's awful. And it is in my view, out of many reproductions you can get, it's an awful reproduction. But I don't rebut it just on that problem alone. I rebut it on the fact that there's a plethora of other tombs you could use. A plethora. As Metatron would say, a veritable cornucopia of tombs that we could look at. Genuine, untampered tombs that you could look at, and you refuse to look at them, and you want to make all of your conclusions based on the pigmentation of the ancient Egyptians from a single, not even tomb, because I will stand by the fact that I don't believe it looks like a tomb of Seti I, but not even tomb, but reproduction. That to me is and this is symptomatic of the Eurocentric argument. And by the way, I'm going to call him Eurocentric because you're going to see in his video, he's back to calling us Afrocentrics again. I thought that we had crossed that. I thought we had moved past that, but we're back to calling each other Afrocentrics and Eurocentrics. So that's fine. He calling us Afrocentrics again. I get it. Metatron, you got a brand and you've got a name call us. I get that. That's fine. So, but this is part and parcel of the Eurocentric argument. They accuse us, of cherry picking. When we do the opposite of cherry picking, we will show you all of the tombs. My thing is like, hey, let's look at all the tombs. Let's put all the tombs on display and tell me what our conclusion is after looking at all the tombs. In fact, we're going to do that today. We're going to look at a whole bunch of tombs today. Okay, you're not going to get out of it that easy. So we're going to look at a bunch of tombs. But they will select not even one tomb. They'll select a version of the tomb that just about sells the story, and then they'll gaslight and turn around and say, oh, you're a cherry picker. It's like, well, I'm not cherry picking. I'm saying let's look at everything. It's hilarious. Let me quickly, before I start the video, I'm going to start this video straight out, but I'm going to give you a quick story, guys. So you guys know I've got a few really kind of like obsessive fans, who make fan content about me. And I use the word fan ironically, obviously. And one of them, we've had a back and forth about Queen T. And he's like, oh, Queen T didn't even look like that. She looked like this. And he pulls out, I kid you not, this is his proof that I'm wrong about Queen T. He pulls out a tomb. I think it's tomb T227, TT227, I think it is. I'll try and find it for you. But he pulls out this one tomb, a 19th dynasty tomb, 200 years after Queen T's death, where she's deified and in her Het Heru form. Obviously, skin gilded, okay? Yellow skin meaning skin gilded. Skin supposed to represent gold because all of the Het Heru were gilded. They were gold. That's why they always presented yellow. It's not because that Egyptian woman had yellow skin. It's because they were Het Heru and Het Heru were gold, okay? So he pulls this one tomb out where Queen T is presented in yellow form. He says, that's the true image of Queen T. And then I'm like, she's got like over a dozen busts when she was living, dude. Over a dozen, man. Like, we don't have to just look at the one. We can look at all of the statues of Queen T. Tell me one where she looks like an Arab. Tell me one where she looks like a white. She doesn't. It's not just the one bust of Queen T where she's got the afro that we rely on. It's all of them. We always present all of the data and say, hey, everybody, here's everything. Make your choice. Here's all of the information. Make your choice. They go, no, look at this. Minotuli showed him to have bright orange skin. So therefore, This is what we're up against. But anyway, let's go. Let's cook. Okay, we're gonna get straight into this without any further ado. I'm a little bit late starting, so I haven't prepped all of my I'm just giving you an advance warning now. I haven't prepped all of my resources because I ran in the house a little bit late. You even saw that I'd originally scheduled this live stream for 9 o'clock, moved it to 9:30. I did that whilst I was on the road, so please forgive me and bear with me. It won't take me too long, but I'm just gonna load up Metatron's video, and then we're gonna go through it. And like I said, I'm gonna give him the full respect. Whilst that's loading up, I'm also gonna kind of load up my resources as well because I need them. Because the paper, by the way, obviously the paper that he referenced, I read that this morning just to make sure, because this is the one thing that the Eurocentrists, yes, I'm calling him a Eurocentrist because I'm being petty because I don't like the fact that he was continually referring to us as Afrocentrists. So this is the one thing that the Eurocentrists do, is they read from a paper and then they think that you're not going to read the paper. They just assume they can say anything they like about the paper and that it's safely hidden in the encoded format, the encrypted format called words, that apparently black people must be allergic to, because he didn't think that I was just going to pull up the paper and read it for some strange reason. But here we are. So let's pull up the paper. Let's read the paper, and alongside that, let's cook through this video. Okay, I'm not. By the way, guys, this won't actually be that long because it's kind of disproven from the first point in, and I'm not gonna drag this out for a fantastic climax. You know, dropping Easter eggs here, there, and everywhere. I'm kind of just gonna you know, just deal with the matter. You know, as we kind of as soon as we get into it. You know, so let's go. Let me pull up my. Did I do notes for this? Maybe I did do notes. I was just looking quickly. I was like, maybe I didn't even do notes. Was I that? Sometimes I'm real arrogant with this. Okay, I haven't got a link to Metatron's video there. And the papers of my, I can find the paper, it's all right. I just realized the paper's on my phone, but it's not actually on my laptop, so I might be able to put it up on the screen. But I don't think I might not need it. We'll see if I need it. Because I've got some of the quotes saved as screenshots. That's why I'm saying I might not need it, because I can just show you the screenshots, the quotes that I've got saved. So let's get started. Let me find the video. Let's open up a YouTube and get cracking. All right, you know how it goes, guys. When the YouTube starts playing, hit a 1 if the audio is all okay and you can hear it all right. If there's any issues with the YouTube audio, hit a 2 and then I'll know to stop and try again. Okay. Boom. And he has been active. I have to give him props because I'm just not as active as this guy.
Hello, number ones. Welcome back to my channel.
I wish I was. It would really help. Was it? No, it was a video. It wasn't a live, was it? Oh, look, he's uploaded another video since then. This is a prolific poster. So let's.
So we were talking a little bit about the tomb of.
Okay. Sorry, I'm gonna let that play for a bit.
So we were talking a little bit about the tomb of Seti I.
Let me get a couple more ones.
KV 17. So not the temple that we have discussed with the.
So let's get this playing at 1.25 speed for a little bit of faster playback. Pull it back. Everyone's tuned in. All right, we can crack. Let's go. Let's go. All right.
So we were talking a little bit about the tomb of Seti I, KV 17, so not the temple that we have discussed with the hieroglyphs, but the tomb. And what I wanted to show you is that this is part of the basis of my answer to, for instance, the Afrocentrist community, among others, when they were talking about the real and true color of the Egyptians. Now, given this is a lot more interesting and deep than the skin tone of a population. In fact, if anything, that's one of the least interesting aspects of an ancient civilization. It's just that it's unfortunately a battlefield for war within the culture war, and therefore that's why it's often brought up. But today I don't necessarily want to focus on that too much. I'll present a couple of things, a couple of points, but I do want to discuss the broader point, which can be used when talking about preservation of pigments in both the Bronze Age, Iron Age, all the way up to classical antiquity, and how color and pigments react to exposure to the weather, but also, unfortunately, manumission and intervention of external sources, including us humans.
So this is where, straight away in the setup of this, I'm not going to say he's made an error at this point. This is where the mis-selling begins, because first of all, let's go back and let's just overview what this paper he's looking at is. Okay, so I'm going to quickly overview this paper that he's looking at is this paper, which is called The Tomb of Seti. I'm gonna have to pull it up for you guys. Just bear with me. I'm going to quickly get this up. It's a free download from ResearchGate. Seti I Florence. Let me just type that in. Yeah, luckily it's a free download, so this shouldn't take too long for me to just pull up and get the resource on the screen. Yeah, here it is. Okay, it's open. There. Okay, bada bing. That wasn't too painful. So I'm just going to pull this on the screen. All right. And I'm going to zoom in. So let's just quickly figure out what we're looking at here. So the paper is called The Tomb of Seti I in the Florence Egyptian Museum, Integrated Non-Invasive Methods for Documentation, Material History, and Diagnostics. Okay. Now, in terms of this paper, although it's called The Tomb of Seti I, blah, 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 it really isn't about the whole tomb. Okay. That's the first thing that you really have to understand. It's really about a part of the tomb, which he's going to come on to in a moment, which was two parts of the tomb, but only one that it focuses on, that were extracted and taken to different museums. One part was extracted and taken to the Louvre. Another part was extracted and taken to the Neues Museum. We're going to look at both of those parts, by the way. Okay. Now they've used the one that was extracted and taken to the Louvre for their analysis here. So they've undergone an analysis, and as you can see here, to be clear to everyone, it's a non-invasive analysis. So that essentially means they're not cutting segments or taking samples directly from it. Non-invasive means, obviously, I know you guys know this, but it means you don't touch it, you don't interact with it. So they're using basically scanning methods to see what's gone on. How has the piece of art gotten from A to B? Okay. Now, one of the errors he's kind of made here already is that he's mentioned Bronze Age, Iron Age, this, that, the other, and this study doesn't do that either. Okay, this study really looks at how it looks in comparison to when it was exhumed to how it looks now. And when it comes to its appearance upon exhumation, we have a lot of guesswork taking place, but the guesswork is based on another piece of artwork. So these are the really important things that I'm just laying out to lay the groundwork in regards to what this paper looks at. And one of the things that we're going to do initially is we're going to jump right ahead to the conclusion, so we get an idea of what we came out with from this study. Okay, and that way we can make sense of whether or not what Metatron here is saying here is true or if it's untrue. So just give you an overview there. We've got the paper now, so because we've got the paper, we can back and forth with this. Okay, so let me just get my stream back up on the screen. There we go.
Human beings. So, when I said very early on, as I was showing you a little bit about this study, which once again is from the University of Florence, for you who are interested, it was the Department of Architecture, University of Florence, Italy. The reason why you have a connection between the tomb of Seti I and the University of Florence is the same reason as to why you have the same connection with France, Louvre, in fact. And that's because if you look at this image on the right, you will notice that this is the map, the 2D map of the tomb of Seti I that we've just discussed. And as you see, there is a staircase. And so you enter, and as you go into section F to section G, and you go up the staircase as you are exploring the tombs, then you'll notice that in this zoomed in picture, you will notice that on both sides of these walls, the walls are covered with artistic representations and pictorial art. And two plates, we could say, were removed by archaeologists. One was sent to the Florence Egyptian Museum, and it is found there right now. And the other one was sent into the Louvre Museum and can be found and examined there. That's why you have this connection. Elements were removed and these elements were transported. And unfortunately, at least when we talk about the one in Italy, these were not preserved well at all, which is really, really a shame. Look at this.
Okay, so let's just quickly jump in to what Metatron just jumped in there, because he's obviously very correct. I'm just going to quickly show you what that, where's it gone? What he was talking about in terms of the two parts that were removed, because obviously it's playing fast, so some of that might have skipped slightly for you guys. Here we go. So I'll just show you the diagram that he had on the screen. So here's kind of a close-up of the diagram, all right? And you have essentially two. So this is a zoom in of what the tomb of Seti I actually looks like. It's a massive tomb, for those of you who haven't seen it. And there are two parts that were basically chiseled out and sent to separate places, okay? So one part was chiseled out, like I said, I mentioned, sent to the Louvre, and the other one chiseled out and sent to the Florence Egyptian Museum, okay? There's one, I do want to say there's one that ended up in the Noyers. I want to double check that, because I'm pretty sure I read somewhere on here that one part ended up in the Noyers Museum. So I'll find out if I'll double check that's the case. So I did just say that, and I want to make sure that I've said that correctly, because I've got that part, but maybe it was labeled incorrectly. Maybe it was labeled Noyers and it shouldn't be labeled Noyers. But we'll come back to that anyway. But anyway, here are the two parts of the that have been extracted, and the one that has been extracted is what we're going to be focusing this entire study on. Okay, now let's leave that there, and let's move forward towards Metatron's claims here.
On the right, we see the original photograph of the current conditions of this drawing that we see here. You will notice that, they have got black hair. Both the queen and the pharaoh have got black hair. Their skin is very dark. They've got some gold. We see some green, some blue. We can see all of this. The one on the left is how the original colors would have looked. Blue hair and blue horns on the crown. So basically what's happening here, which is one of the main items of debate and clash with the Afrocentric community when I made several videos on ancient Egypt, is that one of the main points of debate is that they say, they do it for the skin. I'm not interested in the skin right now. But in general, the main point of debate and argument is that these are ancient, and so the colors fade. And so whatever color we see, the original would have been darker.
Okay, so at this point, this is where I will ask you guys to, and you should see it straight away, because I did. What's wrong with this claim he just made? Because he's just made the claim that this is proof that they darken, because the hair of Hathor is blue here. And by the way, it's still blue here. You just need to zoom into the photo. In fact, let me not just make that claim. Let me show you that the hair remains blue. Okay. So it's not like it's suddenly changed color. It's still blue. It's still visibly a different color. Here it is. Let me just quickly zoom in. Okay. So you can see the hair is still visibly blue here. Yes, it does look a bit darker, but someone tell me, okay, there you go. Surfactant, just too quick off the mark. Okay. Just too quick off the mark there. Someone tell me what's wrong with the consistency of his argument. And obviously surfactant has got it pretty darn close there. Okay. He's made it clear. Okay. Yes, we can all acknowledge, if we want to believe that, first of all, there is a problem with this claim, by the way, about this original image that I'm going to come on to, but hold that thought, because we're going to come on to what's wrong with this original image. But let's talk about this image. Yes, I will support you in your claim that the blues look like they've darkened. Now, Metatron's argument is that, while the blues have darkened, so therefore the entire picture has darkened. The problem with that argument is that we can see that Hathor's dress has substantially lightened. Can everyone agree that Hathor's dress here, which is basically skin colored in this image, is white in this image? Can everyone agree with that? Yeah, we're all in agreement. As if is anyone in a disagreement to that? Am I making a wild claim there? Yeah, we can all agree that Hathor's dress here is pretty much almost bright white, and in this very image, that he's using as his source, the dress is skin colored. Not only that, but if we're going to go strictly by these colors, we can even suggest that the whites of Seti's garments, which are duller than the hieroglyphs here, are brighter than the almost as bright as the hieroglyphs here. So even Seti's white gown seems to have lightened. So what we're seeing is definitely not a universal changing of like to dark, like the entire image has gotten darker. What we're seeing is a selective change. Okay, some parts of the image have gotten darker, some parts of the image maybe have gotten lighter. That's something we can agree to. Now, this is where the discussion becomes very, very simple for us. The first thing we need to ascertain is, what is this image he's showing there? Now, I would say that Metatron has presented to his audience that they've done, in fact, he's going to do it. They've done some supreme spectral analysis and this, that, and the other, and they've ascertained that this was the exact color that it came out looking. That's not true at all. Let me make that very, very clear. That is not true at all. This, what you're seeing here, is a drawing. Okay, and this drawing was done under the, well, let's say the supervision of Champollion the Younger. Jean-Francois Champollion, I believe, was present when this initial drawing was done. Now, if it's a drawing, the first thing we need to ask is, well, if it's a drawing, what format was it in? You know, it's a drawing, and we're not talking about a paint, we're talking about a drawing here, a drawing that was published in a book. Now, I don't think they were publishing color books back then. I don't know, maybe they were. What kind of color palette were we working with? What kind of printers were we working with? Where has this initial image come from, and how reliable is this color palette that we're being presented with? This printer might have only dealt with primary colors. It might just be a really simplistic kind of like representation of reds, blues, and yellows. Okay, we have done no analysis, and let me make it very, very clear. The paper does no analysis about how true to form this initial drawing was and how much it was intended to reproduce the colors true to life. It's not like this is a facsimile or it was a big painting that we can see in a museum. This was a small drawing that was done specifically for a book. That's so rude. Go away. Windows telling me to upgrade. How dare it? Okay, this is we don't know enough about this image, and in fact we could just dive into, let me just quickly dive into the paper so we know what I'm talking about here, because I don't want to make any claims that I'm not backing up. So I'm going to quickly show you what it says in the paper regarding this image. Here we go. Okay, so the gate was mainly involved in these operations. It marks the transition from the upper to the lower section of the tomb and connects the pillared chamber to the corridor, just following a staircase. Here, the rock was used to shape the great. Okay, so the same scene is carved on both the jambs in a specular way, described and drawn from Belzoni, in which, so it says Belzoni, page 22244, in which the goddess Hathor welcomes King and offers him her necklace. The jambs were removed in 1829 by Champollion and Rossellini, who published the drawings. Yeah, published the drawings in 1845. Okay, the fragment comes from the left door jamb, while the opposite at the Louvre on the right side, their width, blah, 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 blah. So it's just telling you there to confirm that this is a drawing. One of the reasons why we know in terms of this drawing being truly accurate is it contains something that you never see on Egyptian artwork. And you see this quite a lot on reproduction drawings, and that's fading. If you have a look, if I just zoom in a bit closer, you can see the shading underneath the eyes, the shading underneath the chin, the shading. Egyptian artwork never had shading. It was always uniform color for an individual. It got all of its shading from its shape. Okay, in other words, it relied on the shape to provide it or to give it a 3D disposition. They didn't change the color to give you an idea that the light was shining from one source or from the other. Okay, we know in terms of this being a reproduction, I would say as an artist that the only thing we should be relying on in terms of this reproduction really is the shape, the form, the positioning, and maybe a loose guide to where the colors should be. And to be fair, if you read this paper, that's what the authors do. The authors don't make the claim that Metatron is about to make about lightning and darkening and this, that. They don't make any of those claims. That is all Metatron's kind of like obsession to be correct about the color or the race of the ancient Egyptians. This paper doesn't make any of those claims. It's just basically saying, well, we've got this picture here and this image here is a good guide as to where certain colors would have been, and if those colors aren't there or if they've changed, we can start to do an analysis as to why those colors have changed. That's all that this paper says. But yeah, I just wanted to show you that, just to confirm that this is a drawing from a book. Okay, this isn't the result of some spectral analysis. Okay, so I hope that you're all very, very clear on that. Now let's jump back in and allow the video to play on.
The reality that has been proven without any shade of a doubt by this study, I will give you a link, is that in this specific case with the tomb of Seti I, and there are several other occasions in which this happens, not just in ancient Egypt, but also in classical antiquity in the Mediterranean basin, is that oftentimes the opposite happens. Pigment darkens with time. Darkens with time. So it depends. There is no, if you hear an umbrella statement, pigment fades away, so the colors were always darker, that's wrong. In this case specifically, blue became black.
Blue became black and brown became white. Same image, yeah? I'm not jumping between images here. Blue became, I'm going to say dark blue, but let's just say black for the sake of Metatron. Blue became black and brown became white. So I think we can all agree, that pigment both darkens and lightens depending on its treatment. Now, I would say when it comes to the darkening, there are definitely isolated aspects of darkening. And these are really obvious. And I'm happy to put my hand up and say, yeah, this is probably a bit darker than it was originally. And we can normally tell that if there's a uniform muddiness over the image where all of the bright colors have been reduced. But when you have this kind of isolated darkness that you see Eurocentrists try to claim, you know, the bust of Queen T has darkened. Meanwhile, she got bright white eyes. She got bright white eyes, you know, red lips, this, that, and the other. Oh, her bust is, oh, just her skin, yeah? Just her skin has darkened, that's it. When I hear that kind of selective crap, I just like, I'm deaf to you. You know what I mean? I can't see you, I can't hear you. You're talking absolute rubbish. But if you look at this image, okay, we can clearly see, like I said, her body has turned from brown to white if we're going to use this image as a reliable source. I don't know if this image is a reliable source. But once again, he's basing his whole thesis on this, okay? Let's do a quick thing, okay? What we're going to do is, in fact, I've got to quickly shout out some donations that have come through because I don't want to be rude about that. So let me just shout out some donations. Tony Malone, how you doing? So black engagement too low on these vids. It's an issue. Well, we're all right. We're 246 at the moment in lives. That's quite a good number. Hit up the likes. Let's get some more people in here. But thank you very much, Tony. I appreciate your input and your donation. Drager says the full color printing press came out in 1910. So there's a no, this came out in the 1800s. Yeah. So we don't know what the color nature of this book was. Did they manually paint each one? I don't know, but thank you for that. That's a very useful bit of information you've given us there. And it says, I use mineral paint. That's now how it works. It would be good. In fact, you sound like you're pretty knowledgeable. Maybe you could do some of the DD and figure out exactly what the situation was behind this one image, how it was reproduced. Okay, I want to quickly go back to the paper now that Metatron has made the claim. You've heard the claim. The claim is that we know with the tomb of Seti I that these image must have darkened. Okay, it's darkened over time. Let's just see in the conclusion of the paper what the paper says. Okay, so let's just quickly have a jump forward in the paper that Metatron is actually citing from and see if this agrees with his conclusion. Okay. So I'm going to jump ahead. And once again, like I said, I don't think the people who wrote the study are doing anything incorrect. It's actually a very interesting study that I'm going to take you through some aspects of. Okay. There's some important parts, but I'm going to just jump to the conclusion so you can see what they came to at the end of this. All right. See if their conclusion says it's conclusive that pigments darken over time and therefore everything was lighter before. Let's see what they say. They said the implementation of the digital documentation could provide a useful 3D model for the interactive mapping of the increasing results. So they're talking about the fact that they use these kind of like non-invasive scanning techniques. So that's what they're talking about here in terms of the 3D model. The first next step may be a very high defined digital acquisition, geophysical survey, may confirm the shape and size of the fragments. The initial big piece was broken into fragments and then repainted. That's very, very key. The reason I'm mentioning that is because the fact that it was broken into fragments and then repainted meant they had to fill up gaps with gypsum and plaster and repaint it. So although what we're looking at appears to be a completed piece that was taken straight from the wall, it was actually broken and then reconfigured and retouched. And one of the things that they've mentioned is the constant retouching that has caused the change in pigmentation. So let's carry on anyway. Geophysical survey may confirm the shape and size of the fragments, their articulation, and the presence of iron clamps. The investigated fragment of KV17 is the result of, listen to this, guys, because this is just like the nail in the coffin, okay? The nail in the coffin to everything he's just said there. The investigated fragment of KV17, so this piece that this entire study is based on, is the result of several repaintings, retouches, and protective treatments. I'm going to read that again because that's kind of like, yeah, we could end this live stream at that point. Okay, but let's read it again. The investigated fragment of KV17 is the result of several repaintings, retouches, and protective treatments. In other words, there has been change from how it looked before to how it looks now. It's not the result of Bronze Age, Iron Age treatment. It's the result of Eurocentrists coming in with their paintbrushes and their glues and their fragments and their gypsum and going, that's what it is. Okay, that's what it is. That's why it looks different. Okay, the diagnostic essay performed and the preliminary results obtained prove that the combination of the imaging techniques together with elemental and molecular spectroscopies, I hate that word, spectroscopies, is a powerful tool for the knowledge of the materials. Its high potential open many research directions. So here they're just kind of like giving themselves, you know, a bit of praise. We've found this out by discovering these things. Now, I'm at this point going to go into and give you guys a bit more detail about this study because I could kind of play it and pause it, but this is just giving me an opportunity. Let me load you with a lot of data from the study, kind of like the important quotes, so you understand exactly what the study says, exactly how this image has changed, because it hasn't only gotten darker. Let me make that very, very clear. It has gotten darker in certain parts. It has gotten lighter in certain parts. In some parts, it looks muddy. In some parts, the paint is completely peeled off. That is what has happened with this piece. And I can show you the alternative pieces as well, so you can understand more truly how it should have looked originally before it underwent, you know, extensive tampering. So let's quickly have a look at that together. So I'm going to stop reading from the conclusion now because we've had our little mic drop moment. We know that's the case. I'm going to quickly give a shout out to Drager, who quickly said, I meant not autograph. Okay, he's just corrected himself. I say, oh, you meant to say that's not how it works. Cool. All right, so let me quickly take you through some aspects. I've got some notes here, and I'm just going to take you through them kind of piece by piece. So bear with me. Okay. In fact, I am going to let him play. I'm going to let him play because I'm going to rebut some of the stuff that he says. I'm going to let him play.
Now, if you really want to talk about the ethnicity, whatever, yeah, the queen had dark skin. Totally. I would consider this a brown skin. So, yeah, sure. Great. Fantastic. As you know, there is a veritable...
let's just pause there. Sorry, we have to pause there because this kind of like, I would consider this a brown skin. I would consider this a dark skin. Look, Metatron, let's talk Turkey here. Yeah. These complexions here are not complexions that fall within the range that you are presenting. These complexions here are not complexions that fall within the range that you're supporting. Your whole argument about Minutili, and you're going to see when he brings up Minutili's reconstruction again, he's going to reference that he even thinks Minutili was too dark and they were probably lighter. But even his source piece, this piece here, this bright yellow background, but with rich brown piece, even that is several shades darker than Minutili's approach, or his fabrication. That's it. Dan Minutili's fabrication. In fact, you will not find an example. Let me say this very, very clear. You will not find an example in ancient Kemet that hasn't been tampered of people that are painted as light as Minutili paints the Egyptians. And this is the figment of all of these guys' imaginations, be it Metatron or Luke Caverns or any of these other guys who have had to debunk. They invent this orange race theory, and I don't know, it's like they just create a movie in their mind where they've seen all of these orange skinned or light toned Egyptians that are on ancient art that look just a little bit, just a little bit darker than. They do not exist. And like I said, we're going to go through a veritable cornucopia of examples showing you that this is an illusion. What you're seeing on the screen here, even in this yellow piece, which I think lacks a bit of the brown punch of ancient Egyptian artwork, this is the default. This is the color that ancient Egyptians came back to much, much more. I think it was browner than this, and we're going to prove that by looking at some of the artworks. I think it was much browner than this, to be honest with you. In fact, I would say this one here that they're saying is darkened is much closer to what the original artwork was targeted to look like. The one that they're saying is darkened, but obviously lightened on the dress, is the one that's the target of the ancient Egyptian skin color. Okay. But we'll come on to that.
Cornucopia of different skin tones, because in my worldview,
he said it.
I would consider this a brown skin. So yeah, sure, great, fantastic. As you know, there is a veritable cornucopia of different skin tones, because in my worldview, my position, ancient Egypt was a multi-ethnic civilization. They had people with different skin tones, as we see the way they represented themselves in art and how they represented other people. By the way, in this specific tomb, there is the very famous, some say infamous, representation of not only themselves, but also the Nubians, who are clearly black. And
to be clear here, he says the Nubians, who are clearly black. I have to correct here, and obviously I'm not going to blame Metatron for this because a lot of people get this wrong. They are not Nubians that are being depicted. Okay, they are Nehesu. Okay, Nehesu, the closest thing that you can describe Nehesu as is perhaps Cushites or Ethiopians, if you're going to go by the Greco-Roman terminology, but they're not Nubians. Nubian is a new demographic based on the people of Seti who were Upper Egyptians. So Nubians are and always have been Egyptians. They've always been a part of the Kemetic culture. Yeah, they've always been a part of it. They are the first name. In fact, I would say they are the most important part of the Kemetic culture if you're going to go take their nome or their Sepat naming convention for what it is. So the Nubian, region, for want of a better word, is Seti. Okay, and that's a nome within ancient Kemet. And I think a lot of people miss that. So the dark people and Minatuli's reproduction are clearly by phenotype people who are related to the Southern Sudanese, to the Nuer people, okay, who are obviously depicted in that tomb, not all tombs by the way, but in that tomb depicted darker than some of the Egyptians. We don't know because a lot of the tomb was being smushed, but who are depicted darker than some of the Egyptians. But that's a normality for Africa. I actually agree with Metatron in that ancient Kemet was a multi-ethnic. The problem is we don't agree what those multitude of ethnicities were. Okay, I think all of those ethnicities were Africans, indigenous Africans, and I know what the range of indigenous Africans look like being an indigenous African. I know that the range of the spectrum of colors and the spectrum of appearances and phenotypes that you'll get in Africa is more than explicable within the continent amongst melanated continental Africans, that is native Africans. We are fine with ancient Egyptian artwork. We have a phenotype to fit every single artwork. We don't need to create races. We don't need to create non-existent peoples. We don't need to start to say, oh, well, this is someone who's like us, but, you know, it just happens to have really big... No. It all fits. It all fits. We have all of those looks. Every look from the broadest nose, thickest lip pharaoh to the more narrow aquiline nose, slightly prognathic pharaoh. We've got all of those looks on the African continent. In fact, we've got all of those looks literally along the Nile. From the Nile to the Great Lakes, we don't need to look outside of those populations to get there. And this is what you're not getting. Yes, ancient Egypt was certainly multi-ethnic, just not in the same way that you think it was.
Different from the regular Egyptian, whose skin is instead a mixture of brown and red, if we want to look at the pigments used. But do remember, oftentimes the pigments, the way they look now, are darker because of the aging. And then we see Asiatics, sometimes we see Roman, and Romans look European. The Romans look just European. Some have like...
And I didn't know what he meant here, so maybe someone can help me out here. He says he's talking about Romans in ancient Egyptian bas reliefs. We know for a fact the Romans weren't around for any of the three dynastic eras, so maybe it's my limited understanding of the late period, but perhaps someone could point me in the direction of a tomb that depicts Romans, because he's like, well, Romans are, and they're depicted. Well, I'm like, I ain't never seen no damn Romans in ancient Egypt. Yeah, I haven't seen them, but that could be my ignorance. There must be some around the 30th dynasty. I'm assuming there was some around the... Yeah, it must have been, because obviously Cleopatra and, you know, Mark Antony and this, that, and the other. But all I'm saying is that, you know, I do obviously focus on dynastic eras and the eras of indigenous rule, not the eras of foreign rule. So he kind of like hit me slightly sideways. He was like, Romans. I was like, Romans in ancient Egyptian artwork? Where? I can't recall a tomb. Well, yeah, someone send me a tomb or something that I can reference here.
Like, got a very fair skin. Brown hair has been shown as a representation of Romans. Black hair has been shown as a representation of Romans. So if you cut my hair, I could have been a good representative of a Roman.
Of course you could have, Metatron. I mean, we're always going to get the, you know, someone looked like me back then. That's fine. Okay, of course you did. You look like a good representation of a Roman. I can't argue with you because, in fairness, I haven't seen the tombs that you're referencing. So if someone sends me some of these Roman tombs, I can have a look, or at least the tombs, ancient Egyptian tombs depicting Romans, you know.
When it comes to both, in some cases, when it comes to both skin and complexion, but sometimes they have a lighter brown as well, that's shown in Egyptian representations of Romans. And then you have the Asiatics tend to be very light skinned, and so are the Libyans. And you can recognize the Libyans because they have an ostrich feather on their head, ostrich being a connection that the ancient Egyptians recognized with the Libyans specifically.
Okay, so I want to pause that there as well. So he's basically, if you didn't realize what he's done, he's basically said all of the surrounding nations were light-skinned / white people, okay? And I'm sure he wasn't trying to be a WS when he was doing that, but this is where I'm going to disagree. And this is one of the criticisms I have of Minatoli's reproduction. Because to be very, very, very clear, you know, Wildflower has said it in the chat, and I'm going to say this unequivocally. Libyans were not white at any point in Egyptian history. Libyans were not white, okay? And what's really interesting is that he's given the definition of a Libyan. He says you can know the Libyans because they have the ostrich feather in their hair. keep that energy, because I'm going to make a very clear proposition as to who the Libyans were. When we look through the tombs, we're going to see some real Libyans. But I've made it very, very clear, and I didn't make it clear last time. I didn't like Minatoli's reproduction because it made the Libyans look white, and Libyans weren't white. Libyans can't survive. Libya has recorded the hottest temperature on Earth. Do you know it holds the world record? Libya. Okay. 58 degrees, I think it is. Yeah, 58 degrees, I'm pretty sure. The hottest temperature on Earth is recorded in Libya. How on earth are you going to get pale skin? He's not even talking, he said the Libyans were white. And if you look at Minatoli's reproduction, it shows the Libyans as being pale skinned. Guys, you have to be realistic. And this isn't me being rude. This isn't me being condescending. But later Europeans, pale Europeans, you cannot survive Libya's climate without modern accoutrements. That is just a fact. You can't survive Libya's climate. No white person is surviving in Libya without the modern uses of, you know, SPF and all of this stuff to, you know, aid their survival. There's a reason why you white people wouldn't have been found in that part of the planet up until very recently. That's just, you can't even suggest that the entire population of Libya was white. Okay, I think you'd be lucky if you had a few Asiatic looking kind of like Middle Eastern people drifting in and out. But I'm going to tell you right now, the ancient Libyans were not white, and I'm going to tell you who they were. In fact, we're going to look at their hairstyles. So please stay tuned, because when we go through the other tombs, we're going to address all of these. So like I said, put a pin in that. Libyans were white, feather, yeah, ostrich feather, and we're going to look who they more likely were than anybody. Okay, let's carry on.
And so we will see all of this. I'll show you some of this stuff. I do just want to focus on this because the study shows phenomenal evidence that demonstrates that color and pigment can darken with time. You can even see it with a naked eye. And they did not use the naked eye. They used all sorts of technology, like, for instance, the XRF spectra and a lot of other stuff that I've already actually described in details in one of my videos. Now, it's been a while since I read it. When it comes to the technical aspects of it, it is spectroscopic analysis.
Okay, so this is where he's being false. Okay, and I'm not being rude, but he's being very misleading here. He's giving you the idea that this study, once again, was to prove that pigments darken over time. This study had almost zero interest in that. It does make a couple of mentions to the fact that parts had darkened, but it makes far more mentions that colors had altogether disappeared that used to be there. And just to be clear, so you guys know that I'm not fibbing, I'm going to take you back to the study, okay, and we're going to look at a couple of excerpts so you can see where this is being, where he's being a bit misleading, which is, you know, par for the course. But yeah, here we go. So let's go back to the study, okay, and let's look here at this picture, for instance. So I want everyone to look at this image that's on the screen. So I think this is the waistband. Look at the image at the top. Yeah, I want everyone to look at the image at the top, okay? Almost all of the color has disappeared. We all agree with that, guys? Yeah? Now look at the image below, the black and white image. And I want you to take a note of these white zigzags, okay? Now, these white zigzags represent where the color blue would have been. These white zigzags represent where the color blue would have been. Nice, deep, dark blue. You can see where it's preserved in some places at the top. But a majority of the places, I would say 80% of the dark blue that was used here has completely faded off the image. Notice how Metatron didn't mention anything about faded colors. Okay, he talked about colors getting darker. Let's have a read. Visible and VIL images of Seti's belt showing the presence of scheme painted with Egyptian blue, white in the VIL image below. So Egyptian blue would have been present everywhere. You can see white in this image below. And yet it's almost completely and entirely disappeared on the belt above. Now, someone tell me really quickly, is that an example of pigment darkening over time? Sorry, am I clutching at straws here, people? Is there something that I'm doing that's misleading here? Or is that as clear as day for everyone to see? Yeah, we can all see that. All right. So there's not really an argument to be had here. Now, I'm not saying that there hasn't been some marginal muddying, and this is where I will give agreement, okay, to Metatron. If we look at this image, for instance, this is one where I wouldn't necessarily pose or state a strong argument. I would say, cool, yeah. Have a look at Hathor's hand here, I believe. Yeah, I believe this is Hathor's hand over here. And if you look at the wristband, which used to be kind of like a gold and blue, you can see that's muddied. So I would say there's a generic muddying that's kind of taken place over the skin here. So perhaps the dark brown, this, and by the way, this doesn't disqualify that the original color was dark brown, but this just suggests that the new brown that we see has had some muddying contribute to its color. Okay, I'm happy to put my hand up and say that is the case. I'm not the kind of person who will say, no, her skin, this is what Eurocentrists do. Her skin is the perfect color, and this is an isolated case of dark. That's what Eurocentrists do. They make excuses. I wouldn't do that. So I turn around and say, yeah, cool. And you know why I turn around and say that? Because irrespective of if her skin is this color or if her skin is this color, she's still a black woman. It doesn't make a damn bit of difference to me. Okay? It literally makes no damn difference to me. You could paint her in this color, you could paint her in this color, you could paint him in this color showing in his face or this color showing his, it makes no damn difference to me. These are all black people. These are all black people. Okay? This is still someone who is kind of dark skinned. Yeah, this is kind of a dark, not even a medium tone. This is like a medium to dark skinned black woman. Okay? This is a sun-touched, sun-blessed, sun-kissed black woman. So it doesn't matter to me. I don't have to defend the darkness of the blue of her hair if they said it was initially that color. Now, obviously, you guys will also know that I am skeptical about although they said it was blue initially, remember, I always talk about the fact that the undercoat color, the kind of like the base color, sorry, that's the better word, the base color is sometimes the one that shines through. And you know from the study that I did on the color blue, that blue and black were interchangeables. They belonged to the same color family. Okay, they weren't treated differently really in ancient Egypt. Okay, they were treated as being the same thing. Blue would be invoked when they wanted to get the truest black. So to use blue would be to say blue black. We want to get the darkest black. And this is why they used blue for invocations of Osiris. They used green. Sometimes it was a base color. It wasn't so he looked like an alien. This was the base color that needed to be mixed with the darker pigments to create a true black, a strong black. Okay, that's what that was used for. It was to create a strong black. So even though they're like, well, this was initially blue, I believe blue in many cases was used as a base color to get the truest and darkest black. So the target might have been black anyway. You know, it might have been black anyway. I think that's the case, just like I think the red is never the target. And we'll look at other tombs and other artworks to prove red in Egyptian artwork was never the target. There weren't red people walking around. The ancient Egyptians were a reddish brown. Okay, it was a strong and rich color. It's the color of modern melanated Nubian people, modern melanated Saidi people, modern melanated people all along the Nile. Okay, they have that deep red, rich tone. Okay, that's an African skin color. We don't, there's no fabrication or creation there. Okay, let's carry on.
And yeah, and it's proven a lot of this, the art that we see was lighter. Yeah, there we go. Look, to connect to what the archaeologist that we talked about was saying about how you prepare these walls before you start inscribing the hieroglyphs. The figures were first sketched in red, as I was telling you. The final outlines were then traced in black by another artist to create the final and correct guide for the sculptor. A coating, thin, gypsum, I don't know how to read it, you'll have to help me with this, based preparatory layer was given to ensure a homogeneous background from the chromatic and absorption point of view. The high technical quality of the tombs of Thebes, also due to the excellent quality of the rock, a fine, homogeneous, and compact limestone, ensured a good preservation of the paintings observed by many travelers of the past. So already we see that someone in chat actually earlier on was saying, how are they so perfectly sketched? Because they prepare them. The main in situ causes of degradation of these architectures are infiltration of water with the consequent transport of salts, detachment of and fall of fragments, as we were discussing, but also cracks due to the mechanics of the rock layers. They reuse as dwellings, barns, hermitages, warehouses can have caused different transformations over the centuries, from carbon black deposits of lamps and fireplaces till the cuts in the rock walls. Yeah, and then there is the whole section where I remember that they discussed it, and as I say, I did read the letters where they say that they can. Yeah, look at this, exactly this. This is. I want to read this.
So just to be clear, he's spoken quite at length there. He spoke first of all about the preparation of the tombs, and the tombs were essentially basically chiseled mainly out of limestone, local limestone. Gypsum would be occasionally used as a way to smooth and to get a kind of perfectly flat surface, but as much as possible they would try to use the limestone, and it was the application of paint directly onto the smooth limestone that created a really good surface that allowed for longevity of the art. Where there was kind of like the overuse of gypsum, etc., that's where you get kind of like quite a lot of degradation over time. So he's broken that, well, he's read that quite well. That's absolutely the case. Now, to be clear, none of this, once again, is making the claim that the degradation over time or stuff changing is a exclusively darkening of the pigment. In fact, that claim is not being made at all. Like I said, that claim is not being made at all about the pigment darkening. In fact, I'm just going to quickly pull up a quote that I highlighted from that opening section that I don't know if he is going to get to. Let me quickly flick and find it. Okay, so this is what I want to quickly show you. Sorry, just bear with me. I just want to pull up this quick quote for you guys that I'm going to read for you. Will let me zoom in? Oh no, here we go. Zoom in this way. There we go. So let me just quickly zoom in on this quote that I highlighted. So this is talking about, once again, that piece that was cut out and then sent to the museum. It said it arrived at Florence later in fragments. So this is really important that we understand this. It didn't arrive in as a single complete piece, but this is part and parcel as to why it looks the way it looks now. Okay. It was reassembled and restored to be exhibited to the public. That's what Rossellini wrote in 1830. So as far back as when they discovered it, they were already altering and tampering with this piece. Okay, straight away. Of course, the intervention must have included the filling of gaps and junctions. Consequently, many painting integrations were probably necessary to camouflage the fillings and to revive the strongly altered colors. Let me read that again. Many painting integrations were probably necessary to camouflage the fillings and to revive the strongly altered colors. Okay, once again, the claim was being made that this study is proving that natural ancient Egyptian pigments, untouched, untampered, will darken over time. Yet we are reading the evidence, and the evidence quite clearly says that this has been painted, it has been touched, and that tampering, that modern intervention is what's caused that muddying effect, that what I showed you guys a minute ago. Not ancient people getting their art wrong. Because as far as you know, when it was exhumed, it looked perfect. It's the modern intervention that has created that muddying over the arms. And they want to try and make the claim that, oh, ancient Egyptians got varnish out and they splooshed it all over their artwork. And as a result, that's why all of the people look dark in ancient Egyptian art. Well, this study doesn't support that. Okay? This study just does not support that whatsoever. Okay? So this is a very false claim that's being made here. Let's carry on.
This last thing, Giambattista Belzoni discovered the tomb in 1817, but in reality it was discovered by Zahi Hawass because he discovered everything. But anyways, and he immediately realized its importance, describing it as the principal, open quotes, the principal, the most perfect and splendid monument in that country, close quotes. He did make drawings and wax casts, that already, of many decorations and staged an exhibition in England in 1821. The conservation conditions were good, and many of the early visitors said that the colors were as fresh as if the painters had just finished their work. This is mind-blowing.
Okay, so this is once again, so what he doesn't realize is the point he's making here is contradicting the point he's trying to make, because he's trying to make the point that over time these paintings have altered and have darkened or have changed as a result of how they were treated by the ancient Egyptians and their response to modern whatever. But what he's reading here says quite clearly that when they found this, it was in perfect preservation. And the problem is that it's not in perfect preservation anymore. And he's tried to isolate that to the darkening, and yet we can see, contradictory to what he's saying, that all we have is a image that has muddied in some areas, it has lightened and peeled and flaked and faded in other areas. And ultimately what we have is something that is very distant, or at least marginally distant from where it was originally. Okay, none of this is a justification for his argument that all ancient Egyptian pigment darkened over time. That hasn't been proven at all. That hasn't, once again, I'm going to stress the fact that that has not been suggested. Okay, let me pull up quickly another quote for you from the paper. Sorry, just bear with me. Okay, so let me quickly show you the version of this tomb, the other part that was taken to another museum. I believed it was Noyes, but I could be wrong. But either which way, this is the other part, and I want to bring it up so you guys can see it. Okay, I'm just going to pull it up. In fact, let me just get it on the screen now here. So this, what you can see on the screen now, is probably the first thing I would assume would have been logical for Metatron to do, and that's to pull up where this exists elsewhere, because we have two chunks that were taken, one that was taken to the museum in Italy and the other one that was taken elsewhere. And if you have a look at this second piece, okay, that wasn't discussed, just look at the richness of the tones there. Okay, now this one, from what I can see, doesn't appear to have all of the issues of universal dulling, but we can see from the torso, look at the richness. Yeah, look at the deep richness of the skin tone there. Okay, that's not a light skin tone. Okay, that's not a light skin tone. This one hasn't, for what we know, had identical treatment to the other piece. Okay, we can see that this is a rich dark brown skin tone. Okay, and dark brown, I will stress, in my view, is the target color, and I can prove that. I will prove that by showing you guys other pieces of artwork and other tombs. Okay, but we can see it. This should have really been ground zero. This is where we should have started our investigation. Okay, this is where we could have just looked and made a comparison. Okay, and yet this was not looked at for some reason. Let's carry on.
The plates attached to his publication document some of the removed reliefs still in place. The opening through began a long degenerative process since the following year when a flood caused the fall of fragments from walls and ceilings. So similar situations happened in the temple of Seti I as well. And when you read the one more thing that I want to add to this, and it's there was a practice that happened when there was a craze with tourists. And what they would do is that they would create wet paper casts of the hieroglyphs and also a lot of the art. So what that does is that they would take like a paper, damp it, and put it on top of the wall, and that would take some of the pigments and kind of create a little bit of a carbon copy of it, and then they could sell it. This was done a lot, which was a disgrace, and that ruined a lot of these. So the preservation is different to the way it was. And some of the reason, again, when we look at these, we may think it's because it's 1,000 years old. The reality is because of all the nonsense that happened in the last 200 years. And that also connects to one of the points that I was presenting during my counter argument when I was discussing with some of my intellectual opponents on what the ancient Egyptians looked like. Because one thing that happened is that there is an image I'm going to show you right now, and then we'll close with this topic. We'll start the next topic. But I want to show you.
I'm going to pause there before he jumps into that. And I want to talk about this kind of quote that he made about, you know, them finding the image, and the image looked like it was as fresh as if they had made it yesterday, and this, that, and the other. So let's just get a quote, because this quote was actually on the actual article by Champollion. So you can find this in the study. Okay. It was in French. So this is translated from what Champollion wrote in French. It says, in the actual Valley of the Kings, Biban el Muluk, we admired, like all the travelers who came before us, the astonishing freshness of the paintings, similar to what Metatron was saying there, okay? And the finesse of the sculptures in the tomb of Meremptah. But this beautiful catacomb is deteriorating every day. The pillars are cracking and crumbling. The ceilings are falling to pieces, and the paint is flaking off in scales. Okay, that's what Champollion said. It doesn't sound like there's a fear of darkening. It sounds like overall degradation. And normally what we see in ancient Egyptian artwork is paint flaking off, things lightening, colors fading, top layers, of skin tone, top layers that are treated like they're, by the ancient Egyptian restoration teams, like they're dirt, because they want to invoke a look. They want to invoke a phenotype that they have in their mind. So all that brown, let's get rid of that. Oh, get rid of all that brown. Let's get to that fresh red. Let's turn these into some real sunburnt Europeans. You know, they want to get to that lobster red. But that wasn't the target color. And well, like I said, when we get to the other tombs, we're going to see that is the case. So I think I've had a few super chats that I might have missed out. So let me go through those now as well, because that would be a nice thing to do. So let's start off with Deshaun. Thank you, my guy. He said, if that brown darkened, it wouldn't look like the other one. It's clear that those are two totally different colors. Also, Egyptians often used certain colors as a convention, not meant to be actual. Okay, thank you for that contribution. I actually think, other than when they were shown specific meaning, so actually agreeing with what you said, other than when they were shown a specific kind of scene. So mourning, you would see the invocation of white being used. Okay, when people were mourning, or when someone had recently passed, white was the color for that. When you have a someone who was being shown in the form of a neteru, then they would be depicted gilded or in yellow. The yellow was just a way of showing that this person was gold. Okay, we have many statues to Tutankhamun gilded gold, and obviously multiple sarcophagi where they're gilded, and where the people weren't rich enough to gild sarcophagi, they would just paint it yellow. So this overuse of the color yellow in ancient Egypt, and people really acting like they don't understand why yellow was used, really bewilders me. Yellow was an alternative for gilding. And obviously the Osirian, when someone wanted to be kind of like shown to be an ascended being, they would show themselves in true black. Black was not the color of death, it was the color of ascension. Okay, it would place you on the kind of like the Osirian level, so to speak. Okay, so black was the color of ascension. It was to show that someone had attained a certain degree of kind of like progression in their whatever spirituality, for want of a better word. So apart from the kind of invocation of key colors used for people, my belief is that the colors were realistic. I believe that they loved showing accurately what people's skin complexions look like. And I believe they had all the variants we have today. Look at your complexion, Deshaun, for instance. You are a yellowy brown. Do you know, you already know, if they found this portrait of you, Eurocentrists found this portrait of you, they would sell you as an Arab. You know that for a fact. Oh, look at the yellowy brown. It's like all of these colors that belong to us, they've came and they've colonized. They've colonized our they've colonized our flipping color spectrum. Yeah. And they've just said, you take black. Everything else we want. Reddish brown, yellowish brown, deep dark chocolate brown, caramel blonde. They take all of that. You get black. They've literally colonized our color palette. Yeah. And this is something that they're very adept at doing. Thank you for your donations, much appreciated, and very insightful thoughts there. Macy said, keep hitting them with the facts. I will, Macy, don't you worry about that. Headnock said he emits wet paper casts fading colors. Yes, he does. Well, he emits wet paper casts damaging. He kind of goes away. I didn't really, maybe I should bring it back. Tell me if I should bring it back, Headnock. But to me, it seems like he avoided saying that they faded them. He just said, oh, they just damaged this, that, and the other. He's allergic of admitting fading, because in these Eurocentrist mind, it has to be darkening. It's just darkened or damaged. Okay, there's never a case where something got lighter. Yet we know the stripping of color always results in fading, especially if your base color. If ancient Egyptians were painting onto black limestone, yeah, or onto black granny diorite, then the stripping of color would cause things to darken. But they're not. They're painting onto white limestone. So anytime something gets stripped away, it gets lighter. You'd think that's basic science. You'd think we didn't need to explain that to them. You would think that I wouldn't have to do a live stream explaining to these Eurocentrists that it's very likely all ancient Egyptian artwork has faded. But here we are in 2025 explaining basic science to these fanatics. And that's literally how it goes. Dietrich, thank you very much for your $9.99. It says, you've exposed Metatron's lack of rigor since he started making videos on ancient Egypt. I don't know why people still think he's credible on this subject. Keep up the great work. Well, you know, he saw this paper, and I don't think, let's be very, very clear, I don't think Metatron is ignorant to the details on this paper, and I don't think he's ignorant to the fact it doesn't say what he's saying it says. I think he's got a kind of like, he's got an agenda. He's got an axe to grind, and he's got to grind it. And he said before he doesn't really work towards an agenda. But to me, this is clearly an agenda. You are out there. You are out there putting out information that this study proves the phenomena of things darkening over time, and it doesn't. The only thing it proves is that ancient Egyptian artwork gets damaged over time. And on this occasion where there has been darkening, it's totally explained by retouching and basically tampering by Eurocentrists and Arab-centrist Egyptologists. They're the ones who tampered it. It's not Afrocentrists who decided they were going to pull out their paintbrushes and start changing things. So how can you then turn around and say, oh, well, it's darkened, this wasn't the original color, oh yeah, or this Egyptian varnish? Unproven.
Show you this image, and it takes us to this from, as I say, the tomb of Seti I. I'm going to give you a little presentation of this because it's fascinating.
So this is the image he's obsessed with, Minatuli's reconstruction or reproduction of Seti I, which is just complete and utter shite. I'm going to call it straight away. It's complete and utter shite, and we'll go through it together. But let's carry on.
Welcome to the inner circle.
Welcome to the inner circle. Right, we're gonna vote, guys. Which one is the best voice? The angel voice or the demon voice? We'll have to decide.
By the way, so in case you didn't know,
when we were talking about this, so this image.
By the way, in case you didn't know, and I'm sure most of you do know, Munatoli's, the reason why he's so excited about this is because this is from the tomb of Seti I. So the very tomb that this study is about is the same tomb that Munatoli drew this god awful reproduction of. And actually, I've got a nice little question for Metatron if he's going to accept this reproduction. I want to know if he's going to accept other reproductions, because I have a reproduction of the tomb of Ramesses III, and I want to see what his response to that is. That'll be really interesting. But anyway, going back to this tomb of Seti I, it's the same tomb that you see here, but Minatoli's reproduction is basically the Eurocentric attempt to racialize the tomb. Because, by the way, I don't think the tomb was there to make a racial statement. I look at it the same as the tomb of Hoi and many other tombs that have multitudes of different populations of people. They're not all racialized. In fact, they ignore the tomb of Hoi, because everyone in the tomb of Hoi, Libyan, Nubian, Kushite, Egyptian, are all black. They're all black. There's no debate about it. And they're all kind of like different shades of brown. They ignore the tomb of Hoi because it's one that you don't see them making a table of nations out of the tomb of Hoi. But when they've got this tomb where they want to kind of push forward this kind of like white Asiatic race and white Libyan race, it's like they haven't even left room for the Arabs. That's the funny thing about Minatoli's reproduction here. All of the Arab centrists are probably like, yeah, go Metatron, stick it to them. He's like, hey, Minatoli's writing you guys out the story as well. Yeah, he's saying basically it was black people, orange people, and white people. Yeah, that's what Minatoli is saying. Yeah, Minatoli ain't some Arab centrist. He ain't here for your. He isn't here to provide a room for all those people. Be like, oh yeah, the ancient Egyptians are Arab. Like, nah, he's writing you right out of this picture. Yeah, so you guys got to get real about what this is depicted here. Okay, but anyway, that's so you know why he's kind of excited about this study. Let's carry on.
Image is found in the tomb of Seti I, as I was describing, and it's an image that represents the way the ancient Egyptians saw themselves. So the guy on the right is an ancient Egyptian, this is an Asiatic, this is a Nubian, and this is a Libyan. Okay, and I want to specify that this is a drawing that represents an image on the wall. This is not from ancient Egypt. I think it's kind of...
And to be very, very clear, I'm glad he's actually specified that and made that clear, because he didn't make that clear when he made his first video about the race of the ancient Egyptians. He just kind of presented it. But this time he's like, no, this is a reproduction. It's not an original. Well done. I appreciate that. That's good. You're being honest. The problem with this reproduction, and let me say this clearly, is that it's, like I've said before, it's crap. It's a crap reproduction. Even the facial features don't match the facial features of the artwork. He doesn't get anything right. The statures look slightly wrong. And look at the face of the way he's drawn the face of the Nubian. It's all like squashed up, like someone just like put a vice on the front of their face and just reduced it. And then the ancient Egyptian's got this tiny little knobbly chin. It's like it's really crap. And then the ancient Egyptian is far too light. And I proved this to Metatron. He can look at the tomb. Now, his argument is going to be now, obviously, based on his false interpretation of the study that he's just used. Well, it was probably this light when Munatoli saw it, and what's happened is darkened. It's darkened over time. So we're seeing a darkened version of the initial tomb that Munatoli saw. The problem with that argument is that it can be proven wrong very easily. Very easily. Someone just asked me, can I show the original tomb image? Not sure if I've got one, but I can just pull one up really quickly. That shouldn't take too long. But I think he shows it on the screen, which is why I was going to let the video play out. But let me see if I can get a decent-ish image of tomb of Seti I. It's not the easiest tomb to get a nice image of, but let's try and pull one up. Boom, 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 boom. I'm trying to pull one up that's decent resolution. It's not really relevant unless I get the correct wall, which shows kind of like where Munatoli got his it's a very big tomb, as you can imagine. Okay, here's one. And bear in mind, this one I can just tell by looking at it's been overexposed, so they've tried to lighten the whole thing. But regardless of that, I'm going to show this one because it's a relatively clear image. Relatively clear, definitely overexposed, but I'm going to show it anyway. So let me open this in a new tab. So this is a view of the tomb, okay? All right, so this is a view of the tomb, and this has been overexposed. I can tell you that straight away, all right? If you look down here, my argument would be that kind of deep brown that you see there, that would be the target color for the Egyptians. And what we can see is kind of like a lightning, but even with this overexposed, very lightened image, we can't really see anyone as light as what Munatoli's suggestion, perhaps with the exception of these four people in the middle. But this isn't like, this is an overexposed image. Let me see if I can find a better one, because there's one that shows all the races, but I'm just trying to show it to you. What's interesting is this one. Let me just show you this one. I think this one is done by Lepsius. Yeah. So I think this one was done around the same time. Let me know. Trying to find a good image. Because that one doesn't show any of the Nubians or anything. I was trying to find one. I told you it's not the easiest tomb. So here's one. Here, this is the best one that I can possibly show you. Okay, let me pull up this one. Okay. So this is probably one of the best ones that I can show you. Let me zoom in. Okay. It does show a bit of an isolation, but I want you to look at the richness of the color of the ancient Egyptian faceless. We can see the alleged Nubian here. Okay. We can see the Nubian here. We can't really see much else. This is how bad kind of like the current state of the tomb is. This Asiatic looks the same color as Munatoli's Egyptian. Okay, so we can see this is kind of the color that he settled on for the Egyptians. And then this Libyan just looks like a complete mess. And this is how the Libyans always look. But you can see the leg there, and they argue that the Libyans are white. And I'm telling you right now, there's no way Libyans were white historically. And I'm going to tell you exactly where their hairstyle came from as well, so you understand who the Libyans are, who their closest ancestors are. Okay, but this is like a little bit of an attempt to isolate in the same way that Munatoli's reproduction is. And as you can see, let me just quickly do a quick comparison. I want them both on the screen, so I'm just going to quickly shrink this down so they're side by side. That didn't shrink anything, it made it bigger. Stop being irritating. There we go. As you can see, even on this one, bear in mind, this one wasn't done with an agenda to prove Metatron wrong. I just found it online. But look at the difference between the skin tone of the Egyptian and the skin tone of the Egyptian here. It's funny, in this image, the skin tone of the Egyptian matches exactly how ancient Egyptians are normally depicted, with a very deep brown skin. Clearly very deep brown skin. Now, actually, I'm going to raise this point now. Here's a really interesting point now. So let's, for the sake of argument, I know Metatron is in love with Munatoli's reproduction here. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that I'm going to give you that. I'm going to say to you, fine, I'll give you Munatoli's reproduction. But if we're going to accept Munatoli's reproduction, we have to also accept Lepsius's reproductions. Okay? And I want to see where that leaves you. So what do I mean? Let's have a look. Bear with me, I'll be 1 second. I'm just going to pull up another image. I actually thought I had this saved in my document and I don't appear to. That's annoying. So give me 1 second. Just trying to find this. Sorry, guys. Sometimes think I have things saved in certain places and they're not there. Okay, so this is the image I want to show you. So let's accept Minatoli's reproduction, okay? But then on that basis, let's accept other reproductions. So I'm going to quickly open this image in a new tab. Now this, by the way, I'm not a big fan of any of these reproductions. I all think they've been, yeah, I think they're all, none of them are particularly good. But if we're going to do Metatron's argument, let's have a look at the three tombs where they kind of create these table of nations. So this is the tomb of Seti that we're looking at the top, okay? And let's say, for the sake of argument, this is how the Egyptians are depicted there, okay? This is how the Amu are depicted, or the Asiatics. This is how the Nehesu, or the Kushites, are depicted. And this is how the Jehenu, okay, or the Libyans, or the Western Desert dwellers are depicted. Look at that. I mean, that hairstyle, I was going to say it's ridiculous, but it's ridiculous on this person. This hairstyle has nothing to do with this person, and ostrich feathers in the head has got nothing to do with this person. Okay, I find it really frustrating that we've gotten here. But anyway, let's move on. Sorry, 1 second. I can't see my stream. Make sure it's still working. Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? There it is. There you go. Sorry, I lost my stream there, so I didn't know what the hell was going on. Let's carry on with that trail of thought. Next, we have the tomb of Merempta. Okay. Once again, the Remet, or the people of Kemet, or the Remet, which means, I think it just means men. Men, and I think it's like Remet. They have a term that says men above men. But let's just say the people of Kemet, once again, depicted this way. Okay. Just looking like, to me, light-skinned Africans, but whatever, I'm not going to go into it. This is a reproduction. They're normally not very good. The Amu are depicted this way. Okay, quite consistent with how they're depicted here. The Nehesu are depicted this way. And once again, the Libyans are looking a bit weird and not even complete. Now let's carry on. Ribu. Yes, Ribu is the ancient Kemetic word for the people of the Libyans. So that came later in the New Kingdom. Jehenu was the one that would have been used kind of like around the Middle Kingdoms. Let's move on. Okay, finally we have the tomb of Ramesses, and this is the tomb they hate to talk about. Okay, they hate to talk about this tomb. Let's talk about the tomb of Ramesses. Look how the ancient Egyptians are depicted in the tomb of Ramesses, the Remet. Okay, they are depicted jet black, the exact same as the Nehesu. In fact, the only time in any of these alleged tombs or table of nations we see the ancient Egyptians depicted the same as anybody else are the Nehesu. And it's not the first time or the last time that they are depicted as the same as the Kushites. This is not a one-off. There are other occasions where they are depicted the same as the Kushites. But look at that depiction. That's not, the ancient Egyptians are always painted in red. Not in Ramesses III. This is the tomb of Ramesses III. Okay? This is the tomb of Ramesses III. Why are we not having a discussion about this? Why we keep talking about Minatulis, but let's talk about Lepsius's reproduction over here. Let's throw all the reproductions into the mix. Let's have a discussion about them all. Let's not just talk about the one that suits our agenda. Because to be quite frank with you, like I said to you before, it doesn't matter which tomb you pick to me as a melanated person, because whether or not someone is a reddish brown or a deep black, I know for a fact those all fall within the spectrum of what we call the melanated African race. Okay? It doesn't matter which shade they are to me, totally irrelevant. So why are we not talking about the tomb of Ramesses III? Why is this ignored? If you want to play that reproduction game, I've been proven right by the study, which says to me, Minatoli's crappy reproduction is the best. Okay, cool. Well, what about Lepsius's reproduction? Can we ever talk about that? You happy to have that discussion on your channel? Or are the far righters not gonna not gonna rock with this representation of the ancient Egyptians. That's when it all gets a little bit. Ooh. Yes, that's when it gets messy. Now, also, you also note down in this one that the Amu are depicted with that kind of Libyan hairstyle, the hairstyle that's been associated with the Libyans. We'll come on to that, okay? And then we have the Jehenu over here depicted looking a little bit more like the Asiatics. So interesting. We'll come on to those. Like I said, when we look at a few tombs, we're gonna kind of like start making some sense of these different depictions of people. But I want Metatron's video to play out, so we're nearly there anyway. So let me let him play out, and then we can have some fun looking at some tombs.
Kind of obvious if you look at it, but just to make sure that we understand each other, this is just a drawing made by an Egyptologist. What's interesting about this is that we're going to look at the original on the wall. I have it right here. Okay, so this is not the original, but this is the full image. Okay, this is a full image, and it was made. Minutoli is the name of the Egyptologist. Minutoli's reproduction. One thing about Minutoli already that I want to discuss is the fact that Minutoli is an eyewitness. So he went. This is the original wall. I'm going to show you. There we go. So this is where we take all of this. This is where we take all of this. I've done an analysis of it, and I'm going to share it with you right now. One thing that I want to say about Minutoli that connects to what we were discussing today is that Minutoli went there before all the crazy degradation happened, is an eyewitness. And we've just discussed how vivid and well preserved the tomb was. We just read it. We read all the information about it. He had access to it before everything went to shit hit the fan. And then he had created the drawing. He commissioned someone to create the drawing. And he said, yes, that's a good representation, because he couldn't take the freaking wall and bring it home, luckily, since people have done that. And he wanted to show it back home in Europe.
And that's a fair point. I can't argue with that. When Minutoli would have seen it, although I would like to know the year that Minutoli's reproduction was made, because they were very quick to get in there and start with it. But anyway, that irrespective, we can argue that Minutoli's interaction with the wall maybe would have been prior to them smearing all this cement over it. All of this damage that you see in the ancient Egyptian artwork tends to be modern damage, and I've got proof of that. Actually, there's a tomb called TT56 that has undergone serious tampering, repainting, and smearing and destruction. So, tomb of Urukuptar as well. We might have time to look at that as well. Tomb of Urukuptar, which had all of the black figures wearing leopard skins, cement smeared all over them. You can't see any of them anymore. So this kind of repainting of the Egyptian tombs, which will shock some people, is very, very common. Very common. So even the tombs we're looking at, we can't take them for granted. Most things most of them have suffered some kind of tampering. Where we get lucky is the tombs that have been found, I guess, more recently. They're the ones which are much less likely to suffer at the hands of the Egyptian, even though they did that with Tomb of Nefertari as well, didn't they? But anyway, so point being, yes, I hear his point that Minutoli would have seen a more purely preserved version of the tomb. That I agree with.
So I believe Minutoli more than someone who looks at it now and draws conclusion, also because often these conclusions come from a place of culture and messages rather than whatever the heck.
Okay, so that's the ignorance there, because he says I believe Minutoli because essentially he's come from a place of purity, or someone who's not been influenced by culture, this, that, and Minutoli was literally at the height of the most racist era of Egyptology this world has ever seen. Okay, he would have been contemporaneous with Champollion Figeac, which was the Champollion the Elder, not Champollion the Younger, who was on the side of truth, but Champollion the Elder, who was a far-right white supremacist, and he would have been contemporaneous with them. These guys were wild. They were cooking up all kinds of theories. Okay, this is when they were cooking up dynastic race theory and pushing that in. So this idea that Minutoli would have been born into this kind of like, oh, there's no ideology here, that's ignorant. Okay, that's ignorant. He was born right into, his career was birthed right into a space where you better come and serve our agenda. Don't bring those ancient Egyptians back looking too black. That's what he would have literally been served with. His pieces, his reproductions, in that he couldn't take the art with him from the tombs, would have served as propaganda pieces for the colonies. Okay, they would have served as propaganda pieces, and this is why my whole thing about, oh, I trust Minatuli, it's like, well, you don't need to trust Minatuli. Leave his stupid reproductions alone. Glean what you can from the remaining tomb of Seti, and tell you what, if the tomb of Seti I is too damaged, let me show you a veritable cornucopia of other tombs where you can get a good idea of what the reference color for ancient Egyptians was. Let me show you that, Metatron. Leave Minatoli's stupid reproduction alone. That's what my argument was. Oh, I trust him. Oh, he saw the tomb and it's purest, this, that, and the other. It's like, leave it alone. It's no good. It's garbage, you know?
Actual analysis, an in-depth analysis of the data. So having given that, let's have a look at the current situation with this section of the wall, right? And then let's see what we can learn from it as we correlate with this drawing. So of course, when we look at the drawing, we see that there is a massive difference between what the ancient Egyptian, the average ancient Egyptian looks like. I would say that I would go as far as saying that this is probably a typical representation of an ancient Egyptian of the Delta area.
So this is now saying this is a typical representation of the ancient Egyptian of the Delta. He's referenced an image, like I've said already, where this skin color, which is borderline orange, it's kind of like an orangey red. And he's saying that this is what I think is the correct color, even though he's already admitted it's a reproductive piece of art. He hasn't gone as far as to admit that it probably had an agenda to it. But he's also, bear in mind, if let's take ourselves back to Metatron's first video, he took us through how the ancient Egyptians, what their standardized paint mixing practice was. And he said, remember quite clearly, he said they mix standard red, this is his words, by the way, standard red with standard brown to get the final color. That was Metatron's words, okay? A mix of red and brown. Remember that image that I showed you just a minute ago? Okay, same tomb, guys, just to be clear. Same tomb. Same tomb. Yeah? Just to be clear. Same tomb. And yet he's decided that that is the true representation, even though it can't be found in this color, can't be found in the current tomb anywhere. He's decided, I trust Minatoli's pale and sunburned orange, or whatever you want to call it, and I believe that was the color of the Delta Egyptians. Do you have any further references to support the fact that you believe this to be the color of the Delta Egyptians? Maybe more artworks where they're shown this way?
Or the lower Egypt, the one that is closer to the sea and the Mediterranean, rather than a typical ancient Egyptian in Upper Egypt, which was bordering with Nubia, because that area, in my opinion, would have had a higher percentage of people that, even though they were originally Nubians, their forefathers, then their children in that area, they would have looked like a Nubian, not necessarily this level of black. This is just an example, of course.
And this is hilarious here, because once again, I feel like it's kind of like one step forward, two steps back. He's like, people in the South who would have, you know, had children with Nubians, so therefore there would have been some Nubian infusion. So he's making it very, very clear now that he regards the ancient Egyptians as a separate race. He could have just said people in the South would have had more black people there. Yeah, they would have had a higher percentage or higher population of black people. He could have just said that. I mean, he would have still been wrong in my perspective, because I think they were all different types of black people from north to south. But regardless, he could have said that. He doesn't even want to say that. This is how much I feel like he's pandering to his far right audience now. You know, oh, well, you know, to the South, you know, occasional Nubian would have crossed the border, sneaked in, you know, got over the wall, and maybe had a few kids around the edge. And so you would have seen maybe like a little black kid pop up there, maybe not as black as the black people you see here, maybe not that really full black, but the blackness would have come somehow, would have creeped in, and little blacks here. That's where we are now. It's like two, you know, one step forward, two steps back. You know, I've sent him the study, by the way, Theban nobles, yeah, Anna Maria Makota, who tested the pigmentation of 300 Theban nobles, okay, and she said they were negroid, okay. The skin, the derm, the skin that she was dealing with in terms of, you know, reintroducing, you know, more, you know, hydration, rehydrating this kind of like dehydrated, mummified soft tissue. By her expert opinion, as someone who deals with skin every single day, that's literally her job, is this kind of like scientific dermatological expert. She said it's definitely negroid skin. 300 tombs of the nobles, okay, royalty, 300 of Thebes, yeah. So she said their skin was negroid. This is not us guessing, okay. This is not us just kind of like pushing stuff out. That's a publicly available peer-reviewed study, Anna Maria Makota, 2005. Anyone could look it up again, okay. She said quite clearly their skin was negroid. You know that even if you don't want to make the admission about Lower Egypt, you could at least make the Egyptian admission that Upper Egyptians were black. We know for a fact that the Theban nobles were black. That would be nice if you said that. We still want to push this. Oh, you know, they to make a little hole in the wall to Nubia, pass the baby through, allow the baby to grow to adulthood, maybe put it in slavery, maybe not. Come on, man, Metatron, you can do better than this, man. This is weak.
It's a stereotype. But stereotypes sometimes, even though they may not be descriptive of minutiae, they can still give you a general idea. Just like the Romans telling us that Germanic people were blonde, exception the ones in Scotland, they tell us they're redheads. Okay, I'm not saying that every single ancient Germanic tribes, they were all copy-paste, every single one with blonde hair. But if the Romans give us that stereotype, it probably means that there was a high percentage of Germanic people that had those phenotypic characteristics. And I think we can apply the same logic here. I think this is a typical inhabitant of the Delta. I'll get hatred for it. I don't care. And this is a typical inhabitant of Nubia. And maybe...
Not Nubia. This is a Nehesu. Okay, so typical, this is an inhabitant of Kush. Okay, or Ethiopia, not Nubia. And it's really important that people get that language correctly.
Of some Egyptians, a certain percentage within the Egyptian population clusters in Upper Egypt, which bordered with Nubia, for obvious reasons, that could be also a representation of an Egyptian. And here, on the walls, we see a clear distinction. And we also see that the Libyans tend to be very fair-skinned. Now, according to the Afrocentric perspective, this is not a representation of the typical skin of a Libyan. Apologies for that. I don't know what happened there. I think it is. I personally, maybe...
It's not. Okay, and we'll come on to that. There's other tombs that show you what Libyans look like. And there are odds with this tomb, well, with the remains, I won't even say charred remains, with the tampered remains of this tomb, where you can barely make out a completed individual. But just logic alone is enough for me to say this hairstyle is not compatible with this complexion. This skin color is not compatible with the hottest place on the planet. There's just no way on earth that I'm going to accept that the Ribu or the Lebu people or the Jehenu people of Libya were white. Yeah, I'm sorry if that disappoints you, but I will not accept it. Not unless you give me some substantial evidence to change my mind. And as far as I'm concerned, this very damaged tomb and this very poorly constructed reproduction by Minatuli is not enough to change my mind about the race of the Libyans. I'm sorry, just not going to do that. Okay. Headknock says more Metatron impersonations. You can see when I'm getting slightly wound up because I start doing impressions of him. I try to keep at the academic level. Well, then when he made that statement about the Nubians, breeding with the Egyptians, perhaps, one or two, black people popping up, that just wound me right up. Like, come on, man, you can make that concession. Make that concession that the upper Egyptians, where there was a population of blacks in Upper Egypt. He doesn't even want to give that. It's like, oh man, we're back to square one. But I get it. He's got a far right audience and they ain't trying to hear too much, charitability on his part. So there you go.
Maybe not this
Thank you
milk white, but still.
Sorry, thank you for the donation, by the way. appreciate that, man.
Maybe kind of like me. Could be an idea. I think so. I think it would be a good representation. Now, it's amazing. Yeah, it's interesting stuff. I just scratched the surface. There's a lot to say about this. All right, so what I do show in this section here is this. So first, we need to try and understand which part of the wall we are looking at. And I think you can immediately recognize the black gentleman here, the Nubian, is over here. And then we need to find this guy. We need to find this guy. Now, what in this situation, and again, I'm not trying to look, this is the Nubian. This is a bad representation of a Libyan, because if you look at the wall and you look what's right next to the Nubian, you can clearly see that this looks nothing like this. So Minutoli didn't know what he was doing with his drawing. This is a wrong interpretation, because even though Minutoli did find elements of people that were found on this wall, he didn't draw them in the same order as the wall. And you can see this because if I play it, boom, this is where he got this guy. Not here. And once you do this and you zoom in, as we will, and you identify it, you can immediately spot the ostrich feather. And I think it's actually a very good representation of what we see here. And here we see a bunch of Egyptians. Once again,
I don't think it's a good representation. Also, I'm not sure if anyone made the argument that it was in exactly the same order as what you see here. I think we knew that basically Minutoli took groups of people and made them into a single people or single person to represent the group that he saw. But yeah, okay. I mean, I think it's a crap reproduction. I'm not going to change my mind. And also, this tomb looks like it's been very much like the Eurocentrists have had their way with it. And I think the false representations of the Libyans is a part of that. I think the false representations of the Libyans is certainly a part of that. But yeah, like I said, I think it's a rubbish reproduction. And even the colors don't agree with Metatron's point. I'm just going to carry on saying that.
I do remember that, as we have proven with the study from the University of Florence, their colors would have been lighter. We can kind of even see it here a little bit.
So he just said it there. He said, we've proven with the study of the University of Florence that their colors would have been lighter. And I've proven by showing you guys that study didn't say that at all. So that's the bottom line of this entire stream, was that the University of Florence suggests that the colors, the pigments got darker over time. The study simply says that when artwork is tampered to such a degree, colors will disappear and colors will also muddy and colors will alter as a result of modern tampering. That's what it says. Okay? Doesn't make any claim about actual Egyptian pigment just darkening over time as a natural phenomena. That claim is never made. The spectral analysis, like I think I explained at the start, so it's important that I re-emphasize this. The analysis that took place, which Metatron, I feel, has sold to his community as the idea that they got the original painting, they conducted spectral analysis and they found all of the original pigments. That's not true at all. All the spectral analysis did was essentially identify where different pigments of ancient Egyptian paints were used. So it identified a kind of signature for the Egyptian blue. It identified a signature for the Egyptian red. It identified a signature for blah, 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 and so on. So it identified a signature for each of the colors, and then it could then identify when that color was supposed to be present. That image that he shows us at the very start of the live stream was not an image that they created. It is a drawing from an 1800s textbook. That's what it is. We don't know. We have obviously the words from Champollion that I showed you, and he said the words from the other Italian guy saying, yeah, okay, it looked, really fresh when it came out, but we don't know what that fresh look represented. We don't know that fresh look represented lighter color skin for the ancient Egyptians. What we do know is that when we look at the reproduction versus the artwork that was drawn, that Hathor's dress is almost entirely white when before her skin was almost entirely brown, yet her hair has mildly darkened from a blue to a bluey black. That's it. You prove nothing about skin getting darker, but you made that entire conclusion based on wanting to see it, but you don't have the support within the study, you will not find within the study supporting that conclusion.
Do they look white? No, obviously. No one is saying that the Egyptians were white, but definitely they did not look like this either. So we zoom in, we recognize the blue a little bit.
So here's like, this is what he said is a good representation of that. Who here, just honestly, and this is not me giving mockery, but who here says from this image here that this is a, who, has anyone else got an issue with drawing this image based on what we can see here? Now, obviously, we don't know what Minatoli originally saw, but he has the luxury, Metatron has the luxury of being able to trust Minatoli. Because as far as I know, in Italian history, in European history, researchers had never tried to write modern Italians out of history. Okay? He doesn't have that background. So, of course, he's going, I trust Minatoli implicitly. I trust him. Oh, yes. Why would I not trust him? He's just there. He's an honest researcher. There's no such thing as an honest 19th century Egyptologist. No such thing. Yeah? They were all walking pieces of shit. Okay? They're all racist. Yeah? They all were pushing agenda. They all were involved in tampering. So how am I going to sit down and talk about you trust Minatoli? You could trust him. Good for you. I don't trust him. I have no reason to trust him. He's done nothing to earn the trust of African people. These people have literally made a entire industry of writing African people out of history, and then we're supposed to just trust their reproductions. No, his reproduction is shite. That's all it is. Grace GG just said a point. I was literally making this ages ago, and I don't know why I put it down. Who knows about the Italian that destroyed the Kush pyramids? Who knows about that? This is what they do. They hire their bandits. They hired this Italian guy who went around raiding all of the all of the Kushite pyramids, all of the Sudanese pyramids, he'd raid them for gold and for stuff. And then after he got what he wanted, he would blow them up with dynamite. And he did this with impunity. No one stopped him. They all knew what he was doing. To me personally, he'd been given a directive. They couldn't make it a state-sanctioned action. So what they did is they'd hire these bandits to go around doing all kinds of shite in their colonies. And bear in mind, it was a colony at this time. Okay? So there's nothing that the native people could do. And he went around, just went throughout Kush, blowing up all of the pyramids with dynamite, raiding them. And then they got to talk about, oh, trust me, Lotoli. Oh, you're a good guy. Miss me with that. Thank you for bringing that up, because I think that's actually really relevant, Grace. And thank you for reminding me. I really need to do that documentary. Drega says, I'd love to see Milatoni's journals or opinions. Yeah, that's fair. That would be interesting to see. My guess is they won't be Pan-African, but yeah, it might be worth doing that investigation. I think that's fair. I think that's really fair. Yeah, so I hope I've disturbed you with that story about the pyramids. Thank you, Grace, for raising that. It's absolutely vile. Let's get through this so I can get to the good stuff.
It's a shame that it's gone, so much of it, but we do recognize it. And yeah, I think there is no way that I think the skin, maybe that you went a little too light here, but still, this is not a brown man. This is not a black man. This Libyan is represented.
I can't see if it's a brown or a black man, because the surface is being completely rubbed away. And I think that's the point. That's why I didn't trust this crap, because all due respect, and I don't mean this in a rude way, okay? But I'm going to say this. I'm going to say it now, and I'm going to say it with chest, okay? There are no white people in ancient Egyptian art dynastic era. None. I'm going to tell you that right now. The only people that were classified as white actually were mentioned by Sheikh Anta Diop, and he mentioned about the blonde beast and the relief that they completely wiped out this image of a very primitive form of the modern European that was depicted in different parts of Europe, and it was referred to as the blonde beast. And apparently it was so embarrassing that they erased it from existence. So we only have writings about it. We don't actually have a physical representation of it. They erased it. That happened. Read, it's in Sheikh Anta Diop's book, The African Origins of Civilization. He speaks about the blonde beast, which they erased from history. But aside from that, there are no, and when I say white people, I'm talking about, you know, modern Europeans. They aren't in dynastic artwork. Okay. You get Asiatics, you get, I think, as far as I'd stretch as far as to say people who kind of resemble modern Arabs, maybe, but you don't get anything beyond that. You don't get anything beyond that. There's no depicted interactions. And trying to make Africans, particularly Libyans, into white people, that's not gonna run with me. I wasn't born yesterday. I'm not stupid. Yeah, I'm not stupid. They weren't white. That's just the bottom line. They may have been brown, okay, may have, most likely were black, but may have been like light skin, may have been some brown people. There weren't white people like walking around in Libya. Yeah, I wasn't born yesterday with ostrich feathers in their heads and braids down the side of their heads and dreadlocks on top. Like, come on, man. Get real. This isn't a realistic depiction of a human being. You can't even do that with your hair. So there's no way I'm going to accept this. And I know it's going to sound quite ignorant to some people. People are going to be like, hey, whoa, brother, like you're being a bit strong here. I'm like, no, I'm not. I haven't got time to placate stupid people. Honestly, I'm not going to kind of entertain your stupidity here. This is an illusion and it's not a reality. Okay, this is not a reality of the hottest place on earth. Okay, unless we've got to completely ignore the logistics of biology. But we're not going to do that. Okay, we are going to invoke our intelligence and say that these people could not survive that climate. That's all there is. Yeah.
Present the tattoos are still intact, and that's another characteristic of this culture, by the way. And here, which is because again, another thing we need to
So I just want to quickly read out this super chat before I move forward. James Stewart says, Metatron never mentions Count Volney, who explicitly said Egyptians were the same race as American Negroes. Absolutely. He did. And Champollion, who he used to work with, Champollion the Younger, was quite explicit that the ancient Egyptians were black. They were the Africans, the much scorned out. Yeah, so there was a small window when Egyptology was first, birthed. The father of Egyptology, Champollion and Count Volney, and they would say the right thing. They understood what it was, but then very quickly got overtaken by the racists who basically kept a hold of it up until modern times. So, there you go. Thank you very much, by the way, for your donation. Much appreciated. Let's carry on.
I brought up on this video when I presented it was the fact that oftentimes it is also a matter of which picture are you using? Are they using flash? What kind of illumination is there? So this is why it's wrong to just show one image of a wall and call it a day. You need to show multiple. And
because even if you look up, you can see the face looks. I mean, I just can't accept this. Whatever this used to be, I don't think we know what's being depicted here. But what I do know for certain is that, I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to accept that this is a depiction of a white person. This is not compatible. These people and this culture actually is not dead. Some of you are going to be surprised to find out by the end of this live stream. Once we get to the end of this, so let me.
And if you do show multiple, then you will see that, this is kind of a pink skin tone. And you can recognize it. And there is no way that you can tell me that this guy was a black African. You can still see the pigment, it's there, and it's quite clear. Regardless of the ethnic part, which is, as I say, it's the least interesting and the least important when it comes to these things. It is fascinating.
I would say that there's not enough left of this for me to be convinced that it's not been tampered heavily, and there's too little left of these people. There has to be a reason why this is the best one we've got, and all three of the others have been completely smeared in cement. There has to be a reason, because we all know if there were actually white people in the tomb of Seti, they would have been protected. Their image would have been protected, like, there would have been absolutely no hope for the Egyptians or the later Europeans who came to have just smeared them in cement and destroyed them. We know they do that with the black image, but they don't do that with the white image. So the fact that this is all we have left of that very detailed picture of 4 white Libyans that Minatuli gave us makes me know for certain that this was not a white person. There's some severe tampering that's taking place here. I'm just not. This is not enough to sell me. So yeah, I'm not buying. Sorry.
This looks a little bit black. It was blue. And in fact, you can still kind of see it a little bit. Here we go. And you can see the Asiatic in the drawing is the one that was kind of lightened a bit too much. But in the original, we can still see the kind of complexion that he would have had. And we can...
Okay, and he's just said that, it's perhaps lightened a bit too much. Now, there's a clear divergence there. We can see there's actually quite a thick kind of like tan color to the Asiatic here. And Minatuli has just decided to show him the palest cream possible. This already should say to you, he can't be trusted. There's a racial agenda here. He's lightening people. That's what you'd say if you're honest. You can't just say, oh, well, you can see here he's quite a bit darker, but he just made him cream. Where did he get cream from? There's no cream here. He just decided to I'm going to make him cream. That should straight away. That's all credibility gone from Minatuli if you were going to be honest. But I think you're just happy because this guy looks a bit like you. So you're kind of, you can stay. But it's not the color that you can see on the tomb. There's none of the Asiatics that look this color. And this is the problem,
You still see the original red as part of his girth, or would you call it apron, that he was wearing here. So yeah, this is part of the tomb, and then there is a lot that goes into this also. But yeah, so it's a fascinating section. It's a fascinating representation. But as one last thing I want to say, yeah, this color is actually kind of similar, because do remember, this is what they look like now after the degradation and the darkening. So is it really so strange to believe that what...
After the degradation and the darkening, once again, he's leaned into that argument, okay? An argument that isn't supported by the paper. Once again, I'm just going to quickly say that.
Minutely represented when he chose this specific tone wasn't what he actually saw. I can see this getting a little lighter and getting into this 100%. Give it 200 years, considering the studies that we have reviewed. I think I trust Minutoli. I do trust his eyewitness and expertise. The guy was an Egyptologist. But Grandma told me, yeah, but then of course Netflix will bring Grandma, and here we are.
Grandma told me. I didn't hear him throw that little line in the end. So there you go. There is Metatron's breakdown. Now, what I wanted to do, okay, you can close that down, okay. What I wanted to do, oh look, Facecliff, I wonder what's in there. It's got nothing to do with what I'm going to present, is I wanted to have a look at some tombs now with you guys, okay. And we'll see what's consistently being shown. You've seen that basically I showed you the study, and I showed you how often it kind of contradicted all of the arguments that are being raised by Metatron. I think he's kind of done a lot of fabrication and additional adding there. I'm just trying to see if there's any other parts of the study that would be relevant or interesting for you to see. I think we made the point now. Just trying to think if there's anything else. I mean, I could read the study with you. I'll show you one interesting bit. Okay, so this image here shows how fragmented the image was. So you can just about make out underneath, I'm not sure if you can just make out the legs there and the legs of Hathor there. Like you see every strip here is this is where the spectral analysis worked out that the actual thing had been broken into separate sections. Now, where all of these cracks are, what you have to understand is these cracks would have been filled in with a plaster or a gypsum and then repainted. So you have to imagine, being that it was so fragmented, the amount of tampering and repainting they had to do would have been extensive. This is why we have this piece that has that kind of top layer film that looks like it's muddied a little bit. Okay, it looks like it's muddied. That wasn't the result of ancient Egyptian artwork just being temperamental and being subject to darkening. That is a unique result of this piece that they've taken and they've mistreated through retouching and repainting, just like the conclusion said. So I have to make that very clear. The conclusion is very clear that it's been the treatment that it's received whilst at the museum that has caused its color to not be consistent with how it was originally. Okay, and Metatron has used that and applied it for the whole tomb, even though that tomb hasn't had the same treatment. In fairness, the tomb has had different treatment. The tomb is a complete mess, but that's a result of Eurocentrists doing what they do and destroying African artwork. Okay, so we had a little bit of a look at that. There is a point where it kind of like takes you through the different types of spectral analysis, but I don't think any of that's going to be particularly interesting. I think we've kind of hit the crux. We've hit the crux of that. So I don't think we need to touch that study anymore. So I'm happy to kind of put that away now. And let's get to the good part, because there is a good part. All right. Let's look at a few tombs, because that is not the only tomb. Okay. In fact, there are multiple tombs. And like I said to you earlier, the only people who actually like to look at tombs seems to be the Afrocentrists. Yeah. We're the ones that are all good with tomb analysis, because we don't look at one single piece of, in fact, whilst that's thinking, I just want to share a reconstruction with you. This is random, but I'm going to share this with you. This is a reconstruction that was done by Nydia Senegal, one of my favorite reconstruction artists. And this is a Armana princess. Okay, one second. Let me just full screen now so you guys can see that. How good is that? Okay. You guys know, like, obviously, who are on this channel, you know, we see our African people in the artwork and the imagery. What an amazing reconstruction. By the way, if you're not subscribed to Nydia Senegal, get subscribed. She's amazing. Okay. But this is what we mean when we say, you know, we don't have to do that much when it comes to, you know, we don't change anything. And the interesting thing is they love to speak about ancient Egyptian artwork being unrealistic. Yeah. It's not in the slightest. It's incredibly realistic. They just don't like the faces, you know, that they're faced with. I think her YouTube is try Nydia Senegal. If that doesn't work, try Coffee Mummy or something like that. Something like that. I can't remember. There's people in the chat that will have it. If you've got Nydia Senegal's YouTube, please find it and pop it in. I also think I just got a yes, I did. Let me quickly just pop that on the screen here. T. Kim is right. There aren't even Neolithic people, let alone Mesolithic or Paleolithic period folk. Where are the ancient artifacts? Benin bronzes, Olmecs look like us. Nothing of them in dynastic Egypt. Absolutely. Absolutely. Apart from the fakes, unless you want to go and find the reserve heads or the head of Hemi Inu, which they replaced when they found a headless statue and they put a big old German face on there. And obviously the tampered Rahotep and Nofret, all of their little tampered, crappy fakes that are so easy to spot. A monkey could spot them, but you know, there you go. There's the ones that they'll squeeze through and try and give some kind of lease of life to. But yes, Skykin, you are correct, and thank you very much for your £10 donation. Okay, I think on that note, let's start through the first tomb. So I've got a list here, and by the way, if you feel like recommending a tomb, you're more than welcome to. But I've got a list here that I wanted to go through, and I think we're just gonna do that. So let me just quickly zoom. And this is going to be worth it. So don't any of you even think about going anywhere. All right, I don't want anyone to leave. All right, I'm going to start off with the tomb of Hoi. I haven't got saved images, by the way, so we're just going to be Googling it. Yeah, freestyling. Tomb TT40, tomb of Hoi. This is something that, by the way, they don't do. Okay. They like their selective tombs, yeah? And they like their selective images. They don't just like to freestyle through tombs, yeah, like we do. That's exactly what we're going to do right now. Ooh, this is high resolution, absolutely beautiful. So I'm going to open image in new tab. Got lucky there. I found a higher resolution one straight away. This is 4,000 pixels. So if what did I just do there? I want to open image in new tab. Will it let me? Yes, I did it wrong. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in here. So this is the tomb of Hoi. Okay, amazing tomb of Hoi. And why do I love this tomb? Because this tomb is just rich in detail and in color. So let's go through this row by row. Now, first of all, it's unfortunate it looks like we've had some tampering with the Egyptians here, because we could see very dark brown paint, which seems to have faded drastically on the face. But anyway, let's put that aside. You can see it here as well. And I'll say, oh, well, that's darkened. I would say, no, it's much more likely that the rest has faded. This is, in my view, clearly a base color that's being used here. But let's scroll along and let's see the other people in the image. So I'm going to look at the top row and I want to look here. Now, who remembers what Metatron's definition for a Libyan was? How did we know that people were Libyan? Answers in the comments, please. How do we know that people were Libyans, please? Someone put an answer in the comment for me. According to Metatron, how did we know that people were Libyans? Yeah, he said they had feathers in their hair, didn't they? And I actually agree with that definition. So based on that definition, who are these people? Bowing. Who are these people here with black and brown skin? Who are they? Someone tell me, if we're going to go for the fact that feather in the hair makes you a Libyan. Yeah. Okay. These are Libyans. These are Libyans with the feather in the hair. Okay. Whole group of them. Not quite matching the phenotype of our guy with the tattoos, are they? Okay. This is, like I said, comparative to a table of nations. We have further down here, African Shanga cattle. Okay, we see our Shanga cattle. We see more feather in the head Libyans here, here, and here. Okay, more feather in the head Libyans here, bowing. I'm going to scroll up quickly. These people here are supposed to be ancient Egyptians. Now, why do we say that? Okay, these look like actual Kemetic, or I would say possibly kind of like unified Upper Egyptian, maybe slightly into the Cushitic territory. We don't know. But how do we know this? They wear the Isek. Okay, they wear ancient Egyptian dress. They don't have any feathers on their head, and they got ancient everything about them. Nothing about these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 figures gives us any indication they are anything but ancient Egyptians. Okay, there's no foreign reference for these people. We can't place these people in any other population other than Kemet itself. So we have 5 ancient Egyptians, possibly, you know, diplomats, viceroys, princes, okay, as part of this consort. This one even has the side plait of an ancient Egyptian prince. So we can almost certainly suggest that these are kind of like ancient Egyptian royalty here. 5 of them in the mix, some of them very black. Okay. We don't have any indication that these are, well, let's see this. Make sure that says Mesu. Yeah, so we don't know that these people are anything else other than Egyptians. I'm going to go for the fact that these people are ancient Egyptians. Okay. Unless someone can give me a credible reason why these people should not be classified as ancient Egyptians. Sky King, another donation. Let me quickly give you a shout. Another thing you'll notice that Kemetic civilization is you will never find a single group representation of non-blacks in murals or models. Write another comment, explain what you mean. So I know that it's probably making sense to everyone but me at the moment. Sometimes I get like that around this time. You will never find a single group representation of non-blacks. Yeah, oh, I see what you mean. You won't find the equivalent of the Tomb of Foy. Yes, absolutely, for people who aren't black. Get you. 100% correct. Okay? You're only going to find black people in ancient Egyptian murals, and yet they're sitting here trying to gaslight us, saying, "Oh, where are black people represented?" It's like everywhere. Thanks, we're everywhere. We're in all of the murals. Let's scroll down. Okay, let's get to the Kemites down here. And one of the rules that I think perhaps is missed out, okay, when it comes to depictions of the ancient Egyptians. This is a boat scene. That's very relevant because we'll look at some villages in the boats later and see what color they are depicted. 1 second, I was trying to get to something here. Here, sorry. Stop blanking out. Okay, here. Now, one of the things you'll know, and I've mentioned this before, is an ancient Egyptian protocol is the alternating colors. Okay, so they'll never show people of the same color side by side. You know what? I don't like this. As I'm looking at this, I just realized this might be a facsimile because it does feel a little bit different. This is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I feel like this might be a facsimile. Let me see if I can see the original. I feel like this one might be a facsimile, and facsimile is just kind of like change stuff subtly and they look a bit crap. So let me just quickly see. I know that's a nice high resolution image, but it might not be what we're after. I think this might be the original. Yeah. Can you see the difference? I was looking at a facsimile there and I didn't realize. So that's kind of my bad. Real Tomb of Foy is yeah, looks different to that. I was just seeing a few kind of like random things that were being thrown up, and I was like, hey, this does not look like a Tomb of Foy. I got a bit excited at the high resolution. Let me just open up this image. I think because it's a tomb, a lot of the images will be dark, but let me just quickly open up this image in a new tab really quickly. Sorry, I know this is taking a bit longer than I hoped. Yeah, that was definitely a facsimile we were looking at. And if you look at the original, you know, yeah, not so many random pale reds being thrown up as we saw in the facsimile image. Okay, but anyway, I showed you the Tomb of Foy for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I want to show you another depiction of the Libyans, and I want to have a quick deep dive into Libyans very quickly, because some people have touched on this, and I just want to quickly give a big shout out to Jonathan, who said keep going, and I will. Thank you very much. I appreciate your $10 donation as well, as always, brother. I really appreciate it. And I think one more has just come through as well. So James has said, no one assumes that the Romans were racially different than the Sabines and the Samnites they fought, but somehow the Egyptians were racially different than the Nubians, Cushites for the same reason. Absolutely. Oh, they fought the Nubians. Oh, have a look at, here's the favorite of them. Oh, have a look at Tut's slippers. Tut's fake slippers, by the way. But I'm not even going to go. That's a whole side discussion. Tut's fake slippers, because you can see his real slippers. They're mashed up. But Tut's perfectly preserved slippers. But anyway, regardless, have a look at Tut's slippers. That is where your ancestors are. That's a favorite that I hear from the Egypt for Egyptians. Your ancestors are on the bottom of Tut's slippers. That's what they thought of the blacks. It's like he had Asiatics on there as well. Yeah. Which would be your ancestors. Yeah. He had his enemies on his slippers. Yeah. And your enemies can absolutely belong to the same race as you, whatever race is these days. Hilarious. But yeah, very good point there, James, and thank you for pointing that out. Stacking says yes, boat group, archers group, activity group, etc. Yeah. So I think you're talking about the Tomb of Foy there. But let's stick on the Libyans really quickly. Because I think, as some people have alluded to already, I think in the chat, my thoughts is that the closest relationship to the Libyans in modern time are the Fulbe. And I just want to show you some images, okay? I'm not giving you a conclusive study on this right now, but I am going to present you some images that will give you some food for thought. Okay. So if you look some of the, first of all, if you talk to anybody who is of Fulani ancestry, maybe not anybody, but most of them, they will tell you that, and most Africans will tell you this as well, Fulani are actually one of the oldest ethnic groups in Africa. They are incredibly archaic. Okay. And in my view, Fulani are the oldest ethnic group in North Africa. They are some of North Africa's oldest and an original inhabitants. Why do I say this? It's because we find cave paintings, and I mentioned this in my in one of my videos, that the cave paintings show Fulani hairstyles. These are hairstyles that Fuller people put in their hair to this day, or the Fulbe people put in their hair to this day. Okay. These date back to like 6,000, 5,000 BC. So, you know, close to Green Sahara times, or close to Green Sahara times, you had Fulani people throughout North Africa. And they are very, very ancient people in that region. Now, why is that relevant? Once again, cave paintings, you can see the Fulani hairstyles there. Okay, that kind of front fringe. By the way, as I'm showing you these, where does that front fringe, what does that front fringe look like that we've looked at today already? What does it look like that we've looked at today already? I want you to think on that. Okay, let's carry on. Okay, once again, the preparation of that hairstyle for the Fuller people, the front fringe. Okay, where they will kind of create these twisted locks and then loop them to create that front fringe. Yeah, let's carry on. This is modern Fulani people. Someone tell me what you see. And there's more than one thing that you'll see. Yes, we can see the ostrich feathers. This is cultural continuity. They didn't do this because they saw a tomb in Egypt and thought, hey, everyone, let's change our culture. They did this because they've been doing this for millennia. Okay? They still wear the ostrich feather in the hat. Not only that, but I want you to look at the long single side plait. The long single side plait. They are the only ethnicity. Actually, I will say them, and there is the Chad women in Chad do the long single side plait. But I want you to look at the long single side plait on each side. That is identical to what you see them attributing to those pale people in the tomb of Seti. Okay, so I want you to kind of combine that single side plait with this kind of front fringe and the feather, and realize that what you have there is an ancient depiction of the Libyan people. To me, that's a reflection of the Fulbe culture. That's what it looks like to me. And even here's something that might be controversial to some, but I think even the painting of the skin is a Fulani tradition. I think it's very possible that they might have painted their skin a different color. I think that's quite possible, that they might have painted their skin a different color. You can see that the drawing on the skin, yeah, this is something that goes back probably to ancient times in Fulani, and they may have done the very same on their bodies. They might have painted their body red and then added those marks, and that's what you see, a rubbed down version of when they say, oh, these are white people. But they have Fulani hairstyles. Look at the plaits, the loose plaits, the single plait to the side. This is exactly, and the feather on the head, this is what you were seeing on those tombs. But the difference is this is a cultural continuity. Okay, there has been some obvious like modern kind of influences to Fulani culture, but they still retained some of their ancient practices, or as Diodorus would say, some of their ancient manners are still being retained. So I believe this is a culture. This is a perfect depiction. Look at the side plait. This is exactly that side plait that you saw in the tombs. It made no sense when you saw it on the white man, no offense, but it didn't make any sense. But doesn't it make perfect sense when you see it now being carried out how it's supposed to be carried out? Doesn't that make perfect sense to you? Feather and side plait. Let's just have a look really quickly for those of you who have forgotten. Okay, I want you to ignore the stupidity of the reproduction, but focus on what you're seeing being depicted here. You're seeing the ostrich feather, you're seeing the side plait, okay, and you're seeing kind of twisted hair progressing to the front and progressing to the rear. Now, if it's not, we have to just bear in mind that, like I said, the Fulani are an ancient people in the region, and even if not, they were not the direct people who are being depicted here. What we can see is definitely a cultural carryover between the two. But to me, that looks like, if I was going to make the connection, I'd say that's a relatively easy connection to make. Relatively easy connection to make. They're the only people, well, yeah, one of the only people still conducting the ostrich feather. Okay, and there's that front hairstyle I was talking about. And you saw that in all the tombs dating back several millennia. This is an ancient Fulani hairstyle, and once again, the side plaiting. And this is what, I'm not going to boost myself up. I saw this on Pinterest and I was like, snap. My brain started firing. This is something I actually found from Pinterest. Is the Fulba or Fulani of the Chad zone sometimes braid their hair in a manner which strikingly recalls the ancient Libyans on the Egyptian monuments, probably the best living example of the ancient nomad peoples. I was like, yeah, I ride with that. I can absolutely ride with that. And then I started, this didn't even mention obviously things like the ostrich feather and the other aspects of Fulani culture. So it's one of those things where you just kind of like, I just kind of rode with it. But there you go. So that's my thoughts there. Okay, let's do another tomb. We'll do a couple more tombs and then we'll wrap this up, because I know this is getting late. This actually took a bit longer than I thought, but you know, best laid plans and all that jazz. Let's look at another tomb. Let's look at, I don't even know why I'm looking at my notes. I can just do this off head. Let's look at the tomb of Usa. Okay, I want to look at, yeah, TT56, tomb of Usa. 1 second, there's a tomb. I want tomb of Usa before tomb of Usa. Did it just go Usa without my permission? Oh, there's no tomb. I'm sure there's a tomb of Usa. Here we go. 260 of Usa. Maybe they've not published images of it yet, because last time I saw it was in pictures of it in the Louvre. I wonder if this has got images of it. It's a really rich tomb, the tomb of Usa. It would be nice to show it to you guys. See. Okay, let's do Tomb of Uzahat then. This is Tomb of Uzahat, but we'll look at this one anyway because this is a great one. Another example. This is relatively high resolution. Open image in new tab. So this is tomb, I believe, TT56, Tomb of Uzahat. One of my favorites, as you guys will know. Let's have a look at these people. Now, the first thing you'll know is that the black pigment, what's happened to the black pigment, guys? Well, where there should be black. Where can we all agree where there should be black, unless this is a group of Solomon Islanders, and I don't think it is. What can we assume has happened to the black pigment? Oops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. Just trying to get my stream back up again. Keep losing it. Here we go. Yeah, sorry. So what can we assume has happened? Let's see if we've got some answers here in the chat. Okay, hair. Yep, everyone's saying it straight. Yep, the hair should be black. Okay, we know that. Now the hair has faded. Okay, the hair has faded. Everyone can see that and agree that the color of the hair has faded. But apparently fading is something that never happens. Now, the faded hair doesn't make it any more difficult for us as Black African people to see that this is a bunch of black people. Yeah, I think we could all agree that this is a tomb full of black people. This is that red color that they try to assume is something else. These are black people with black hairstyles. Okay, African people with African hairstyles. Okay, now if the black of the hair has faded so aggressively, can we also, is it fair to also make the assumption that perhaps the skin has seen a similar lightening? Okay, is it a fair assumption that maybe some of the dark pigment in the skin has lightened? Maybe. Do we need to make that argument as black Africans? No, because once again, this skin color is perfectly in the range of what is normally found amongst black people. Okay, now this is the same tomb where we get that wonderful depiction of ancient Egyptian men having their hair done. I can't zoom in any closer than that, unfortunately, which is a bit, oh no, I can. Here we go. Where we can see the ancient Egyptian men getting their hair done. A wonderful depiction, because it also proves false the idea that they're all wearing wigs, which you still hear Eurocentrists falling on that argument. Oh well, you know, they all wore wigs, and the wigs, you can see all the men here wearing wigs. I was watching a video today by some girl called Ancient Sites Girl. I was actually gonna touch on her video, but I've just taken too long to do this one, so I'll have to do that another day. But the bottom line is, yeah, they tried to make that wig argument. Well, if it's a wig, someone explained to me how his afro was standing on end and he's sitting down in a chair getting his hair twisted like we do. In fact, here's an interesting task for you. Okay, here's an interesting task for everybody. Type in ancient Egypt hair salon or ancient Egypt barber, and guess what? You will only find images of. You won't find anyone with straight long hair getting their hair combed. Okay, you won't find anyone getting their hair dyed. You know what you will find? You'll see a picture of Kawit, 12th dynasty queen, 11th dynasty queen with an afro getting her hair twisted. You will see a picture of Egyptian men sitting down getting their hair twisted, because that is what happened in an ancient Egyptian hair salon. Twists and braids, the same thing that happens in an African hair salon. You won't find any other pictures. None. Okay? Zero. You will only find the representation that we are familiar of ancient Egyptians getting their hair done like this. Okay? This is the norm. Okay? Let's continue. So anyway, lovely tomb there. I think we can all agree that the colors disagree somewhat. I mean, if let's just do for comparison, just for the sake of it. Yeah, that's not even Minatoli. Let's pull up Minatoli's one, because that's the one that's really for shizzles and giggles. Oh, where is it? You can't find it where you want it. Minutuli. Oh, I can't find it. I want to pull it up for comparison. I can't find it. I'm gonna give up. But yeah, so let's just zoom out here. We can see the tomb. We can see the colors of the people are just all deep, rich, deep brown. Okay, a rich and deep brown. And I would say, based on the hair fading, a great probability or possibility that they were even darker in their original depiction. This could have been retouched and recolored. Speaking of retouched and recolored, let's look at the tomb of Irukupta next. Did I spell that wrong? No, I didn't. Irukupta. Why can't it find images? Urukarpata. Sorry, you can't spell. There we go. So let's look at the tomb of Urukarpata next. Now this tomb, as much as we could look at this tomb and be like, oh, what a wonderful tomb, it looks nice, look at the rich browns of the images, the sad thing is that this tomb has been extensively tampered. So I'm going to put up this image initially. Yeah, this is good enough resolution. It's going to pull up here. I'm just going to quickly zoom up. So if you have a look here, this tomb here, we would say, oh no, we're happy with that. Look at this. I want you to just pay attention to the top of this tomb, okay? Because you look at that and you see those rich reddish browns and you're like, oh no, that's fantastic. What a wonderful tomb. The problem is, would you believe if I told you that this tomb has been extensively tampered? Not a little bit, but extensively. Let me show you the original in case you're unaware of what this tomb's original look was. This won't take long. Why might take long? Actually, the way my PC is lagging right now. Oh, what's it gone? Sorry, I hate it when I think something is in my notes and then it just disappears. Oh man. Sorry guys, I thought I had this. Carpenter. Sorry, I know this must be really boring for you. Yeah, so I thought I had it in my notes. I've done a video on it, which I'm sure I could show you, but we'll do that another time. It could be to the fact that it's late and I'm feeling very tired right now. I did want to show you this one before it's too late. Oh man, I can't find it. Okay, I can't find it, so I'm not gonna do a trust me bro. We'll just shelve that for another day. Okay, let's do another tomb. Okay, once again, we still have consistency with the colors that are being used here, irrespective of me not being able to show you the deep black tones of the people at the top who are smeared away. I will show you them, or I'll link to the video that I've already done showing that. Let me do another one. So let's look at the tomb of Mena. Okay, so let's look at another tomb of Mena over here. That's a reproduction, so I want an original. So I'm trying to find an original that's full image. It'll be nice. I can just use this one. It's quite high resolution. I hope that's the original. You never even know if you're looking at an original these days. So let's open up a new tab. So once again, Tomb of Mena. Okay. You can see those rich colors. Now, this one's quite interesting because I've used this as an example before. And the example that I made was, you know where I'm going with this. if I zoom in here, what do you think the point that I want to make here is really quickly? What's the point that I want to make here? I want to see if anyone gets this before I put it up. If we can use a bit of logical deduction here. What about it, Zehoven? What about the horse? Good. So the horse matching the skin tone. So here's a follow-up question to that, since you pointed that out perfectly. Are there any red and white horses? Yeah, I think we know the answer to that. There's absolutely not any red and white horses. So if there's no red and white horses, and the horses here are depicted the same color as the skin tone, then we just need to find the horse that matches this kind of patterning, and hey presto, we'll know what the skin tone that they were targeting was. Because they keep telling us, you know, red. The ancient Egyptians were red, and we keep saying no, they were brown. And what we're seeing is just the result of remnants, but we know there aren't red and white horses. You know what there is though? Plenty of horses this color. Okay, plenty of brown horses. This is basically the same species of horse you're seeing here. Okay, so that gives you a very big clue in regards to what the target color of the skin was. It tends to actually, from what I could see, be only the young horses that look like that, because I found another one here. Okay, I couldn't find any red and white horses. I promise you I looked. All the Eurocentrists on my channel think of trolling. I promise you I looked high and low, couldn't find a red and white horse. I looked so much. Red and white horses don't exist. I'm really sorry. You know what do exist? Brown and white horses. So here's a very simple logical deduction. If you're going to accept that the target color for the ancient Egyptians was red, you have to accept that back in the day there were red and white horses running around. Simple. If you can accept that there was a different species of red and white horse running around, we will turn around and we will accept that the ancient Egyptians were colored red. If not, and if you want to induce some common sense, you will admit that the color they were probably targeting is this brown, and as such, their skin color was probably this brown. And by the way, if you're wondering which race has a skin color that matches the brown of a brown horse, oh boy, I've got a whole video for you. Have a look at it. Okay, it says there was no red race. It's a live stream. You only have to go a few back. I'm not going to go into all that with you. Okay, but this is another tomb. Guys, I think hopefully you can see that without cherry picking like the Eurocentrists do, the weight of evidence falls on the side of the Afrocentrists. Nerd Large said, you Afrocentrists, you're trying to make the horses brown now. They know what they'd say. They'll be like, you're trying to make the horses black now. The horses are black. And we'd be like, no, they're brown. You're not brown, we're brown. It's like, the horses are the same color as us. Who would think that was a flex a few years, you know, a little while ago, a couple months ago? Who would have thought saying you were the same color as a horse was a flex? Well, this is what we literally have to do to reclaim our palette, our colonized palette. They've colonized our our color spectrum and claimed it for the Caucasoid race. It's absolutely wild. Oh dear. Guys, I had a couple more tombs to show you, but I am shattered. It's 12:20, and this tomb, I can't believe this went on for 3 hours. Jeez Louise. I've got to learn to do these live streams faster because that was too slow. Hope you had a good time. Let's wrap this whole thingamajig up now. Look, the goal was to address Metatron's video. I don't think anyone's going to watch this for a quick watch, but I think we proved that the study didn't support what Metatron was saying. Okay, the study said something entirely different. And also, the preponderance of evidence still lies with the people who believe the ancient Egyptians were a member of the black race. And that's kind of really it. Didn't want to do more than that. We had a good look at some tombs. And yeah, I think that's it. I think we'll call it a day. Hit up the likes before you go. Thank you to everyone who came and attended. I don't know how we maintained an audience of like nearly 300 for the entirety. You guys are very patient today because it wasn't the most well-oiled machine. I can put my hand up and say that. Big shout out to the many generous donations: Tony, Surfactant, Dregar, Deshaun Williams, Macy, Headknock, Dietrich, Drago and Headknock a few more times. Did I miss Headknock's second one? I did. I missed this. Sorry, I'm going to read a comment that I missed out. They evade the holistic consideration of cultural, phenotypical, and spiritual systemic implications across all of the arts and constructs. Deep. Thank you for that very much. And I'm glad you enjoyed the Metatron impersonations also. I think I've got the rest of them. Yeah, I've got that one. Sky King, Jonathan, James Stewart. Yeah, I think that's everyone. Thank you very much, guys, for donating. Thank you for being here. Thank you for policing the chat. And yeah, I hope you guys all have a fantastic evening. I'm going to get some sleep now. And I'll see you. Before you go, I'm down to 244. What am I doing? Make sure, plug. Of course, I'm going to plug my book release. If you weren't here for the live stream yesterday, and I know a few of you weren't, okay, I am releasing a book. Okay, if you go to you can even go to the website now. In fact, that might be the easiest way for you to. If you go to the website now, it's right at the top. It says here, support our book launch. Okay, new book, Reconstructing Egypt. Hasn't got to the stage where I've opened the pre-sale yet. I pushed it to Sunday, and I'm actually considering pushing the pre-sale out a bit more, so I don't know. But when the pre-sale comes, I will do a launch party. So I'll kind of do a countdown to the launch party of the pre-sale. But in the meantime, yeah, you can join the launch. So if you just kind of like go to the website tkmedu.com, pop that in the chat now. If you go to the website tkmedu.com, on the homepage, you can click on this button that says join the launch. It will take you through here. It has the kind of launch countdown. You can read a bit of an excerpt and then just click here to join the pre-sale, and it'll take you to the place where you can join the pre-sale. Please do that, just so kind of like, yeah, can start to get the numbers up a little bit and a bit of interest going and a bit of hype going, a bit of motivation. That would be cool. You can't pre-order just yet, Melissa, but I want you to, if you're interested in pre-ordering, please just click on that link that says join the pre-sale, okay, and it will get you very close to the point where you can pre-order. So at the moment, if you're interested, just kind of stick around. I want to drum up a bit more interest, okay. Yeah, so we can make that a bit of an event. But yeah, thank you guys for joining me. Go to the website tkm.edu.com, register for the book. I hope you enjoyed the live stream, and I'll possibly be seeing you very soon. Take care, everyone. Have a good evening. Bye-bye. And thank you, Orion. I guess I kind of am an author already because I have done an academic paper. So in some ways you could already kind of semi-classify that as authorship. But no, not a published author. I will be a published author once this book comes out. So yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Nerd Large, appreciate your support there as well. All right, I gotta go now. Bye everyone. Have a good evening. Peace. I'll stream again very soon through the lists, maybe like next day or two. I think I'll do a lot of live streams this week. Cool. Peace.